I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have, I believe, a relatively short agenda. And by the way, I'm going to pass around a thank you note that we got from Rob Kubicki to the trustees, just so you guys can take a look as we go through this. And then we will move on to the bond. So,
I'm going to take your notes.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, I'm not doing a good job of being clear. Sorry. Welcome back, by the way.
Thank you very much.
You're looking tan and rested.
It was tannable and very rest-worthy. Thank you. And
Everyone else is looking sort of,
And enjoyable.
sallow and tired. No, just kidding. Yeah.
you should have seen what I had them do while I was gone.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Okay, so for regular business, our first action is action item A on personnel. Do I have a motion? Motion. Do I have a second? Do I have questions or discussion? All in favor? Oh, my mistake. Sorry. I'm sorry, I can't.
I am.
Just a question regarding the varsity field hockey.
Yes.
We're acting on that right now.
Yes.
I guess, so he was the assistant varsity field hockey coach.
Correct.
So now he's moving to there. I'm not seeing an assistant varsity.
We're
field-
still looking for an assistant varsity coach. The varsity coach resigned.
Okay.
So he moved up, and we are in the process of recruiting an assistant.
Okay. Is that being posted
Yes.
internally and on
Yes.
OLS? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you, I'm sorry, I just can't hear. It could just be me.
The varsity field hockey is not yet approved.
We approved the varsity field hockey slate of coaches at the last meeting, and since that time, the varsity coach stepped down. And so the JV coach is being appointed as the assistant coach is being appointed as the head coach, and we're recruiting for a new assistant coach.
Got it.
Okay?
Can I speak to a point relevant to this issue?
We're having a discussion.
Sure.
I think we were going to add coaching positions and have them do what we have. I feel better having some criteria as to how that process happens. It feels like some of this is in desperation that we're wanting people, and I think that we could just let it drop that.
I'm not.
So so I think that's the question, and I have no idea if are there written criteria now for the qualifications, and I have no idea.
So when a coaching position becomes available, it's generally posted internally. The contract directs that teachers who have the proper qualifications and criterion have priority on appointment for those.
Mm-hmm.
When we don't have a teacher in the organization who is capable or willing to do that, then we go externally. But we have systematized posting internally and externally.
But Joanna, is your question to whether there are some minimum qualifications?
My question related to the process of adding assistant coaches, and in review, I think we had this situation that Peter gave us information with regarding the track position. So that seemed to be a change in what the setup was in terms of coaching assignments. What I'm suggesting is it would be helpful to know how those things evolved. What makes a team qualified for having a JV coach, or an assistant coach or a JV coach? I'm not sure if that is a written criteria. That's what I'm asking.
No, it's not, but I did explain that to you in my response to your email.
But
Right.
I do think
I think it was
the idea of like
Was it my email
written
or-
minimum
No.
qualifications is an interesting point.
So the minimum qualifications for a coach are that they be certified as either a PE teacher or certified as a coach in the subject area, and there are certain coursework that they have to take in order
I'm
to.
not questioning that at all here. I'm not questioning, that's not my point.
Well, that's what's.
I may have mischaracterized it. I thought that's what I heard.
I'm just trying to understand that stuff. What I'm talking about is when we make a decision to expand a program,
Right.
i.e. add an additional coach, is there any kind of criteria for the process? For the future, if not, I mean,
There is a criterion for how things are vetted. We evaluate the program. We look at the program needs. We look at differentiation of coaching. We look at the size of the program. Not all, as you probably know, not all sports are the same or require the same level of support for programming. So I think that you would staff different programs differently. I think in this, for the cross country position, we evaluated, size of the program, differentiation of training. I don't have that email that I had sent to you, but there was a process that we followed to evaluate the need for it. And in this, for right now, I'm recommending the addition of the second assistant coach. If that doesn't work out this year, we're going to monitor that very carefully. We don't have to continue that moving forward. I understand your question. I don't know. I'm trying to answer it for you.
I appreciate that. And I understand the process that you're talking about. At some point, we are adding coaches to the program.
Correct.
That's a recommendation that's coming from the athletic department.
And me.
And I just was wondering what the qualifications, what the process is for that event to happen.
Okay. I'm not sure I understand the question, so why don't I
Okay.
connect with you so that way I can address it
And I
more
should be
fully.
interested in the answer to that question. I don't think it's specific to this. I don't think it's specific to this situation. I think the question is there a set criteria, a written guideline that is followed by the athletic department in determining as to whether another assistant coach or an assistant coach is needed, where there's a JV coach, where there's a varsity coach. I think what Joanne is looking for is there a consistent set of criteria that's followed in the evaluation of when to appoint additional coaches.
Thank you.
Okay. The answer to that is no, there is not.
Right. So I guess the follow-up question would be, why isn't there?
Do we need it? What would that look like? Because I thought the spreadsheet that we got about the number of kids that were participating and what the staffing levels was helpful, and I thought the decision to add a coach made sense based on the spreadsheet, but we do lack an actual policy which would give us that one more step to being consistent with how we respond to situations.
It would be a process, and then you wouldn't be subject to there would be a process in place which would keep the athletic department and the board and the administration safe from criticism from people, right? Because the track program is a highly successful program. So now they're getting additional coaches, right, and additional monies. So if you don't have a formal process that's in place, what's to stop a parent from saying we need another coach for soccer or for football?
And theoretically, it could look like the guidelines you have on class size, right? It's a range, it's
Right, nothing
has
would be
to do with
hard and
how old the
fast,
kids
exactly.
are, or what the
We can
sport
work on some- we
is,
can
et
work on
cetera, et
something.
cetera. It's not like a,
We can absolutely work on something.
I think Joanna had a follow-up there.
as does, I think,
Appreciate your follow-up.
Well, it sounds like a task for the Athletics Policy Committee. If
Funny you should bring that up.
If it meets this year.
I think it's the athletic advisory.
The advisory committee.
yeah.
Yes.
Put
I
that
thought
on
we-
your,
I thought we merged
the
those.
list is getting longer.
I thought we merged the athletic advisory and the athletic policy committee
And I
into
think
one.
we deleted the policy committee because we didn't think it was relevant at the time, and so that stuff is going to advisory, which I think if a policy comes up.
Goes there, okay. I knew there was one less committee for the athletics than there
Yes.
used to
Sarah,
be.
Yes,
I know
ma'am.
that, the volleyball program picked up a coach, that we approved at a meeting of 2 meetings ago. That's what I'm asking about, how did that process occur when coaches were added to a program? For some future discussion, thank you.
I hear you.
And I think it's a matter of equity.
Which I thought was the point of the spreadsheet, was that we were trying to look at that in particular.
Yes,
Um,
but it should be a matter of equity, and all the sports should be looked at on a regular basis. There should be a process in place to ascertain whether additional coaches are needed, and it shouldn't be on an ad hoc basis. I
It's
think that's the
possible that
point.
it should be broader than that, right? That we've sort of gone along for a while with whatever sports we offer and whatever structure we have. And that,
You also have to take into consideration which sports have max out, have a finite roster. So a soccer team has a roster, and they have cuts when you try out. Cross country, track and field, anybody can participate. There's no cuts. So that program is expanded to a certain extent, and it's been revitalized again after, I guess, 1 year of the kind of a drop. And cross country's always had a large roster, so I think it was timely for them. It's a roster that's open. Some schools have 100 kids on their cross-country team. So in that instance, and thank you for the follow-up on that particular coaching addition, but, so we do have to compare which programs have open roster versus a
Correct.
finite group.
That could be one of the criteria in the process.
There are kids to the number of kids, seasonal, games you have. Is it a contact sport? Are you inside or outside? These are all things that affect your work environment.
and potentially if there's a wide range of kids on the thing. These are interesting things to look at. I can't say no. But yes, let's bring back the committee.
Will do.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments before we vote? All in favor on action A? Thank you. Action B is the LAC bylaws as revised. Do I have a motion?
Motion?
A second? Second. Thank you. Questions and comments? Dave, do you want to address the fact that these?
Yes, so we discussed this at our last meeting, and probably one before that as well. One of the things that came out of the last meeting is we were all in agreement. We wanted to run it by our attorneys really quickly, which we did. They got back to us relatively late in the game, and were pretty much fine with everything except for 4 small changes, which are written on this sheet right here. Am I the only one that has one?
No, everybody should have. Everybody should have a set.
So I just wanted to clarify that when we vote, we're voting including those 4 changes, which are small. But I don't know if we want to take like 20 seconds just to look at them, make sure everyone's
Good
comfortable
with
where we
what
are?
they are. Yeah. The changes are redlined.
Yes. So the 4th one, the statement of purpose. 1A under membership, no more than 9. Theoretically, we could have not enough people who sign up. So,
Right.
sure.
On procedures, I don't know if this is a change or not, it's not highlighted. I know there was discussion about the quorum and whether a meeting could take place, and I'm noticing that it does say official meeting. So that's a change too, isn't it? Or was that always the way it was?
That's a good question. So we decided that they could meet without it being an official meeting.
Right.
But one of the things we discussed a couple meetings ago was the attendance issue. So that if someone repeatedly doesn't attend, there has to be some basis for that.
Right.
So there still has to be an official meeting to count for attendance, I guess, separate from whether we just get, there are 9 members and 4 of them come ready to share what they've learned. No reason for them not to share that with the group if they've done the work. But that shouldn't theoretically count against someone who's having problems with attendance. So I think that's why the attorney felt we should have some demarcation of what an official meeting was, even if, for every other intent and purpose, it's relatively moot. And I asked that question too. And then the final one was on D. Again, if there's an attendance issue, the attorney felt that we should say how the LAC members should be removed. And so they added by majority vote of the Board of Education. That was Jack's contribution. So that's where we are.
Has everyone had time to be clear? Any other questions? You ready to vote? All in favor of the LAC bylaw changes? Thank you.
Thank you.
Action item C is approval of the budget transfer. Do I have a motion? A second?
Second.
Does anyone not wish to pay Roslyn the money we owe them? Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Thank you.
We wouldn't be the first district.
I was like, I know, I think this falls under walk the walk, right? All right, we'll move
Just
it on.
saying.
Yeah, we're just kind of,
Noted.
just, yeah,
Noted.
noted. Action D is the authorization of the petty cash accounts. Thank you for your work on this. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
A second.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? I'll point out that thank you, Dr. Giarezza.
Oh, you're
It
welcome.
appears we've worked on this and gotten it in line with the board policy, and thank you.
You're welcome. It
All
was
in
Olivia's
favor?
office.
Sorry.
welcome.
Thank you, Olivia. All in favor? Terrific. Okay, and now we move on to work session 2, the proposed bond.
Okay. Thank you. Just before we get to that part, I just wanted to note a couple of things that we left in front of you so you don't lose them. So firstly, there is a brochure from Dr. Zublionis' office for new teacher orientation. That's scheduled for August 27th and 28th. The board board members are invited on Tuesday, the 27th, to have breakfast with our new teaching staff from 8:30 to 9 o'clock. And then you are certainly welcome to stay through my meeting with them through 9:30. So, but you certainly, I understand if you can't. And then we will do a bus tour late on Wednesday afternoon of the district. So,
Sarah, have new material for the bus tour, or?
I will say I did receive an email from Dr. Zublionis, and yes, as luck would have it, I am available for the bus tour. You're all welcome to come. But the breakfast that he mentions on August 27th, I mean, obviously, if you're not available, you're not. But if you are, it is really a lovely, informal moment, and to meet the new teacher. So if you can make it, please come. But yes.
okay, thank you. And it is a tour like no other. So it's actually very nicely done.
I'm going to keep working on it.
I asked Sarah last year, would you like to do the bus tour? And she said, well, if I were you, I would want me to do the bus tour.
I'm like, he's been here like 5 minutes. What does he know about the bus tour?
So yes. Secondly, there is an invitation and a flyer from the village of Seacliff. The village of Seacliff has invited the board and me to take part in a parade over on Labor Day weekend. It's on September 7th. If you are available and or interested in attending, I would be happy to respond on the board's behalf, so just let me know. Can check your calendars and let me know, or we'll have Betty follow up with you and check on your availability. I will obviously be there.
Is he asking us to march in the parade?
Yes.
Or okay.
Yes.
So yes, Phil Como is organizing this. Apparently, 100 years ago, Seacliff had a parade for returning World War I vets, which they're going to recreate. And my understanding is there will be cake afterwards.
Right. So the invitation says that they would like to invite me and our members to participate in the parade.
We'll be wearing costumes. of
I
some
I just got it today, so I will get some details on the requirements, but you are...
Were we there 100 years ago? Is it a reenactment?
I don't know. You are cordially invited.
Yeah, okay.
Let me scratch my memory. I may have been there. I'll have to steal my grandfather's World War I helmet from my brother. It could cause family disruption, but it'll be worth it for the parade.
All right.
Do we need the board banner? Because that takes some time to find sometimes.
You're never finding it on Labor Day. You can't even find it before.
Like presumably
I know where it is. It's in the
homecoming
plaza. I
will
returned it to
happen
Betty,
at
and I
some
said,
point,
I had a witness. I was like, Betty, I am returning this to you right now. You all see
I'll
it.
make sure we know where it is.
All right, so maybe make a note and ask Betty, because if she will likely know where...
Or if not, Betty's not here, so let's just blame Betty.
Betty is a resident.
I'm sorry, did Betty lose the banner
I
again?
left
Or
it
is
on
that
the
what we're
porch
saying?
last year before the...
That was me. I had it. It got rained out. I returned it.
All right. So thank you very much. Just let me know if we don't hear from you in a few days. We'll follow up with you. Thirdly, it seems to be from our newly elected board members, there is a letter from the state senate for you. I think it's from Senator Gorin.
Yeah.
And so that's that for you. And then lastly, just if you haven't seen it, I left on my trip to Hawaii. I brought back little Hanu keychains for each of the board members,
Very
and
nice.
so enjoy them. Hanu,
you.
you're welcome.
Didn't know where that came from.
It came from me, and there's a little note that explains some of the symbolic significance of the Hanu in Hawaii. It's I thought it was some of the themes really hit the mark for our work. So enjoy them, and it's good to be back. You're welcome.
And the analogy here is, of course, the snapping turtles that emerge from the swamps every Memorial Day, both literally and metaphorically.
In Oahu?
No, here
Oh, okay.
in your district.
Okay. These are
By
very
analogy.
In your backyard.
these are very gentle, and that's why I bought them for
Yes.
you.
And here,
And here they're not so gentle.
They're
So
Maybe you should have brought back sharks.
shocking.
I don't know if that's legal now, but okay.
So anyhow, use them well. They are interestingly enough. When I went to look for them, there were 7 different ones. So you each have so it's sort of fortuitous. You each have one that is unique.
Terrific. We will all
Okay.
compare them afterwards and
It's-
decide,
We can swap when he's
Right.
not
You
looking.
could- you could- I wouldn't even care.
Turtle.
Right? Just don't hurt each other with them.
Oh my God, is yours too? Right, yeah.
They're ours now. You can't tell us what to do.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
All right. let's do it.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. So, okay.
The bond.
The bond. I want to welcome back Stu Schiller, who is our cost estimator, the board's cost estimator, and Bob Furnice, construction manager from Savin, and Daryl Mistraki, and Tina Masidiseas from CS Arch, who are here to work with the board and us on working towards what we hope will be a final. Let me pass it along.
Today.
Absolutely. Final scope of the bond. So the last time that we had been together, I'm in the wrong binder, excuse me. We had been working through a scope of bond that was $39,772,000 $1,029. And through the course of that discussion, the board had asked us to look at several projects. One was the high school locker rooms. The board asked us to look at the Glen Head Nurses Suite. And so we, through the course of that study, we reconvened that following Monday after the board meeting and left the base document at that where it sat at $39,772,029, and then gave you some options, the board some options for ins and outs, and how we thought through how to keep the bond in a tax-neutral place, but accomplish the priorities that were important to the board. So, if you were to take the full scope of what we needed to add, based on the board's, some of the board's discussion from the last meeting, you will see in the yellow tab of your binders that we sent home is the page that I'm looking at for those, right? So you will see the top is broken out by school. Within the four buckets, which are instructional, infrastructure, health, safety, security, air conditioning, and then we have site work to do. You will then see the cost associated with the casework associated with the libraries, expanding the alarm system, the fire alarm system at the middle school, the locker room renovations at the high school, and stadium lighting at the high school as well. So all that together, if you were to just take those projects in without any question at all, you would be looking at a bond of $45,578,885. And so then you need to figure out how to offset that. So we have done some preliminary thinking for the board and given you some options. We can do this in a way that suits the board's needs. If you want to take a look at this by school, by category, but the function of a work session is that the board just works and asks questions, and we are here to answer them and get you to a place where you are comfortable and excited. Stu is able to has the active spreadsheet with him. So as you ask him to make adds or deletes, he will be able to put those in and tell you where we are. But at the end of this, if we want the bond to be tax neutral, we need to be in that $38 to $39 million range. Okay, and then once we finish talking about that, we do have to tonight think about a date to do this, because we need to start preparing resolutions and those kinds of things. And then we need to spend some time talking about the energy performance contract and where the status of that and where we want to be as it relates to the bond, because it is directly tied. It is directly tied to the bond and the projects in the bond, right? So in the absence of the energy performance contract, the board would be needing to find an additional $2.2 million or so in bond scope. Okay, but we'll talk more about that as we go along. Okay. So, what say you?
I have a general question. So when I look at all the numbers, there's about 13.71 or so in soft costs for each project. What does that consist of? Can you give me the breakdown, please?
I can give you, I don't have a breakdown with me, but generally that includes all the professional fees, architect, construction manager, bond costs, printing costs for bids, legal notices, all the some insurance, legal costs during construction. It's basically covering everything that isn't nailed down that you have an expense. So that's there to, also asbestos removal, monitoring, and any other professional fee that is testing costs.
And how did you get to the 13.7? What did you take into account? Our past cost?
We went back and forth on that. It was up higher, and at some point, we all discussed it and thought we increased our, I assume, previous costs that Olivia has. She'd be able to analyze and see that we spend, less than we had budgeted, so we were able to shrink it a little bit than what we had it, so it was higher than what you see now.
We're using 16% for that? And that's based on, right, that's what you use?
16%, yes.
And that's based on other projects that are similar to this? Similar to this.
So when you say other projects, do you look at projects done on Long Island? Do you look, when you say similar projects, what do you look at? Bonds from districts that are comparable, or on Long Island, Westchester?
Long Island and Westchester.
Can you just speak into the mic, please, so we can get it on the recording? Thank you.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Long Island and Westchester districts have similar projects and similar size.
Thank you.
And I thought it was also based on previous projects here in the district, previous expenditures you've had, and analyzing what you've had on other bonds.
All right, but we don't have in place necessarily contracts for all the professionals that we're using. I assume bond counsel is on, they're on an hourly basis, I assume.
Yes.
So it depends on how many hours that they do. We haven't done a contract yet for our architects or engineers or.
Hourly basis, and it also depends on the size of the bond. So,
You're talking about the bond council specifically,
Correct,
yes?
correct.
Bond counsel specifically,
Yes.
the architect and engineering fees are generally based upon the size of the bond.
And all construction costs.
So
For
it
the
goes according to that, what they actually cost for construction. So if there's an overage or an underage, it's
Correct
that.
me if I'm wrong, right? The architect fees are based on construction costs.
So the last time we discussed the bond, there was a concern about some of the stuff that had not made it into the bond, including the high school locker rooms. And the idea that we were open to other concerns that the trustees had that may or may not have made it into the proposal that we looked at the last meeting. So this is very much set up to let us look at what our priorities are for the district, and to make those trade-offs, I'm going to say in real time, meaning in virtual time on a spreadsheet here in front of us, so that we can come to some agreement about what's most important to make it in under the tax neutral
Correct.
line, or even have a conversation about that line.
Okay, I have some questions and concerns regarding that.
Please.
I'm noticing, and I don't remember this coming up in other conversations, but stadium lighting, and what is the rationale behind that, having stadium lighting?
So the stadium lighting was not in the base scope that was, and there was a discussion at the board because of the cost of it. It's $1 million, right? And so it was one of the projects that we had taken out and listed as a supplemental project. The press box and the bleacher work and the lighting work has been was a recommendation and a request from the athletic department. The request is rooted in having lighting on the field and having kids be able to play a little bit later, having the ability to do evening community events, if we were to choose to have them. Lots of schools do, night games on a Friday night, let's say. So that's where that came from. I know that this has come up. I don't have all the history of it. It has come up in the past, in past bonds, and I know there's been a reluctance to go, all the way with it. The infrastructure and electrical work was put in what year?
2012.
2012. So this represents the poles and the LED lights and all that.
So,
all that. It's
can
also
I
a
was
major
gonna-
priority of the boosters. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to add to that. So I know we've had trustees both ask to have the lights included and trustees speak about not wanting the lights. In previous discussions with the press box, I feel we've had people indicate that there were significant safety considerations with the press box. With the seating, I feel like it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was more an issue of more seating would be better, and if you could separate the home crowd from the visiting crowd, you might have fewer issues, I'll say, but that it wasn't,
Right.
it
Ideally.
didn't rise to the same level,
Right.
and that the press box and the stadium seating lighting were all very separate things.
Well,
That's what I got.
What I'm looking at, I mean, that I think lighting's a great thing to have, but it's what are we giving up? And what I'm looking at is the air conditioning in the elementary school. I mean, we have air conditioning as a separate category. I see it as a health category. I also see it as instructional. And I think there's a big difference between the ductless air conditioning and window units. And, having taught for a very long period of time and having been in rooms without air conditioning, with window air conditioning and, central air, which is ductless, is very similar to that in terms of how quiet it is. It just seems that, to me, the benefit of that is far greater to a greater number of students than the benefit of having stadium lighting, as much as I would love to have stadium lighting, but that's
I can't
we're giving something
disagree.
up.
I can't disagree with that at all. My only thing that I would add is that my thought with the lighting has been, if it is in fact important to have the lighting, to have a later start to the high school day, if those two are in fact entwined, and I don't know if they are or not,
I would say they are probably not.
that having a later start to the high school day gets you very, very obvious benefits. And if you have to have more lighting to do it, that would be important to me. But otherwise, you have the issue of the trade-offs and how many students you're impacting with the $1 million of lighting.
I think for right now, you have athletic events where it's getting dark when the kids are out there. That's the impetus behind stadium not lighting, not just for the purposes of having Friday night lights.
that's
So
absolutely true.
you're really, you have kids where it's getting dark when they're actually doing athletic events.
It's a safety issue.
It's a safety issue and it's a security issue. When the lighting came up originally, part of the reason why there was concern about the lighting was there was discussion in the community about having the town of Oyster Bay pay for our fields, and we would have no control over the lighting because the lighting would be in the control of the town of Oyster Bay, not within the control of the district. And as part of the deal to get the town to pay for our field, we had to share our field with the town and for town events. I think the discussion now about lighting is a very different discussion because it would be under the school's control and up to us to be good neighbors. I think there's better lighting. I mean, that discussion went back. My kids were in elementary school and they're 23 and 20. The lighting today is very different than the lighting that was in existence at that time. You now have LED lighting. You could make it more directly down. There are better ways to light it so that you're not lighting up the entire neighborhood. So I think that part of the discussion we can work around. The numbers for the air conditioning, the numbers for the lighting are not the same. They're very different numbers. So it's not $1 million to do air conditioning in all the elementary schools. It's just not. So you're not comparing apples and oranges. So you may be able to do the stadium lighting. We're giving up something other than the air conditioning. With the air conditioning, I'm very concerned about the energy performance contract, which I know we're going to have a discussion on. But I really feel that we need to look at the air conditioning in a more holistic manner, where you would have actual people, you could have HVAC contractors come in and value engineer it and see what would be the best way to do air conditioning, more cost-effective ways. I'm not sure that the fees that are associated with having the contract for the energy performance contract are extremely high, and it may be more cost-effective for us in the long run to do the air conditioning and do it. Maybe it can all be done in the bond. Maybe it can't all be done in the bond. Maybe we have to have a plan that we can put in as a capital project to do it appropriately, and a long-term planning schedule for the budget. There are different ways, to do
Yes.
this. You could do the same thing with the stadium lighting. You could make it a capital reserve project. So, I mean, I get your point, but I don't think the question is whether we have air conditioning in the elementary school or stadium lighting.
But let's stay on the stadium lighting for a second, because
Can I
there's
just
more
respond to
information.
what was
Yes,
said also?
please.
In terms of the cost, it is similar. I mean, you're talking about 1.7 million taken out, 1 million for the stadium lighting, and the new proposal is about $700,000 less than what the original proposal was. So when you take that and you add it all together, it's identical in terms of cost. And it brings us exactly to where we were originally.
And to pick up on that, I think, one of the reasons we got away from the previous iteration of this bond, which we didn't proceed with, and Tim, I know you're a proponent of this in a large way, is that we really felt it was important to reach out to the community and hear from the community. And air conditioning clearly came back as far and away the number one response from the community that they wanted. And I agree with what you said. It is both a health issue and an instructional issue. And I would go further. I don't necessarily need to tie it to the lights, because they either could be seen as a trade-off or not, but that's what we're talking about in general. But this iteration of the lighting, where we are going, of the air conditioning, where we would reuse
But that, we
aspects.
haven't fully discussed that with the whole board, have we? That's what I was going to say.
Well, that's in here.
Right, so I wasn't sure if everybody was clear about.
So before I make my comment, you want to kind of take a step back and
Yes.
talk about what that would be?
I was like, do we need to take a step back and say, we had iteration one, which was how we're going to do the air conditioning, and then we had, when we looked at it again, use the EPC to put in the new system and move the old ones, to make sure everybody was clear on
Yeah, I
that.
think a concise retelling of that story would be helpful, sure.
And I also think that, I just want to point out, the stadium lighting is a supplemental project. It's not a main project, right? It's an alternate.
Well,
I'd like the board to hear consideration about stadium lighting.
Yeah, so let's, so if
so
we
let's-
want to talk just about stadium lighting, and everyone say everything they feel about that, and then we will talk further about the different ways to deal with air conditioning, is that okay?
That's fine.
And then, because ultimately, the whole conversation is about the trade-off.
Yeah, it is going to be about the trade-offs.
Right.
My point is just one is not necessarily a trade-off for the other. That's my point.
100%,
Yes.
yes. The whole thing is.
At the end of the day,
a
everything
series of
boils down to
trade-offs.
some number, and if they all fit at the end, whatever they are, they'll fit.
But any thoughts you have on pro or con or negative on the stadium lighting, then the big picture on the AC, then your feelings on that, and then further trade-offs. Joanna, on stadium lighting.
Let me just suggest the press box first, which I think is critically important. You have people standing on the roof for that, and that's just realistically happening.
The press box,
The press box,
what we've heard from that is, it is a little, it is
There
a
are some
horrifying.
safety concerns.
Yes.
So let's be careful.
in terms of
Yes.
the seating, and I do appreciate the fact of separating visitors from home people. Those bleachers hold a lot of people. I've been to a number of games. I've not ever seen wall-to-wall people in the bleachers.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. I think perhaps in track events when half the athletes are sitting in the bleachers. But so that's an issue that I have.
You could, but you're saying press box is urgent, additional seating,
The seating,
it's
It
fine.
can wait.
and there is a whole history with the light on the stadium. And Marion's absolutely correct about the town of Oyster Bay and how we would have to give up some control about that. But what was also a very, very important piece was the proximity of that stadium to the community and where it is. So I would tell you that my house, for instance, is probably closer to the visitor's side than the visitor's side is to the school. So you've got a whole community there that music, lights, it really is going to affect someone's quality of living in that part of the community. So I would hope that the board would consider that. In terms of darkness, in the fall, you've got field hockey and soccer. I'm not so sure you want those teams playing under the lights, on school nights. That doesn't make sense. And I want everyone to appreciate, because of the proximity of where the field is, Friday night games and Saturday night games will become it will pose some very different issues than we normally have to deal with during Saturday afternoon games. And that.
I think you can be straightforward and explicit. I think it's okay.
You're talking about people going home, people about kids coming in, having had alcohol or drugs. It is a whole different issue. It's a whole different environment. It is somewhat like a free-for-all. And I talk from my own experience. It's kind of a harrowing experience to get through the night. So I want to be very careful when we are going to create that environment again on the other side of the fence from people in the community.
But there are many districts that have, almost
think
every
it's about
district
the-
has every light, has lights on their
You know,
field.
Garden City, it's right, what's that main road there?
Manhasset's in a neighborhood.
It's just, it's an issue. We ask people to consider.
But
No, I'm
what
not
other,
discounting
you're
what-
saying a lot of districts, what other, Garden City, Manhasset, what other districts have lights?
Jericho,
Cold Spring Harbor,
Okay.
but they're in the middle of a,
Great Neck.
Great Neck does not, most certainly not.
Jericho does.
Roslyn, do they?
Jericho has lights on
Great Neck
everything.
barely
Roslyn has
Roslyn
it?
has
Do they?
lights.
Roslyn does.
And they're right in this community too. I mean, I'm not discounting what you're saying, obviously you have to take that into consideration. All I'm saying is that there are many districts, the South Shore, almost all of them have it, have lights, so.
But I'm interested in this idea that like it's a very different dynamic for students that come to games at night versus in the afternoon. But it's also versus what else are they doing? I don't know how to weigh all that.
I'm sorry, I'm not clear on your question, Sarah.
I'm like, you're concerned about kids coming to Saturday or Friday
My
night?
main concern is the proximity of the location of the stadium vis-à-vis the community.
Okay.
That's my primary concern. As a person who spent their life in administration, athletic administration, I'll tell you there are a whole list of things that go along when you start changing game times from 4 or 5 o'clock to 7 and 8 o'clock that are potentially problematic on a lot of different levels. That's all I'm sharing.
Let me just ask, in your experience, just on the other side, because we're talking about the potential positives of that, are there positives that it's a place for kids to go that is somehow at least structured and chaperoned, and there's a uniform?
Until 9 o'clock and they go out. Yeah, yes, they don't.
I'm just asking, I mean, I could
I'm not saying
see,
that there is not a benefit to playing under the lights,
Yeah.
please,
no,
that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying it's a potential problem, but the issue is where that stadium is in terms of lighting and its effect on the quality of life of people who live in that part of the community,
So
including myself.
I don't think there's any question that if we were going to have lighting, that there would be a framework around that, right? That we are interested in the shielded lighting. So not just, so there's, with regard to how the lighting is actually implemented, I think it's not just the neighbors, you also honestly have like the environmentalists and the dark sky people. There are a lot of issues. And Peter and I did discuss this briefly about how you could have a framework in place about when the lights are on and when they're not, and what the limits are around that, and how the lights are physically constructed so as to minimize their impact. And I think all of those things would be critical. And I think we can assume that we can have a good conversation and a good framework around that if we think that the money spent there is best spent there versus spent someplace else.
Correct.
Right, where's the leverage? Do we get other things from it? Then yes, all of those things have to be taken into account. And certainly you don't want to trigger a neighborhood revolt against the
Right.
bond over.
All right, so you had, at the last board meeting, the board had asked us to, as a main priority, was to figure out how to get the $4 million of the locker room into the bond, right? That was the
And the nurse's office.
and the nurse's office, yep.
Those were our two big priorities that were excluded.
Exactly. And so those two projects are worked into, what we want to do. What they do, though, by adding them, is they take any potential bond and make it not tax neutral anymore. So then we had to figure out what options can we give to the board to say, okay, if these are the most important things that we want, right? How do we offset those things, right?
Right.
And so that's where that, so the
Dealing with the air conditioning differently is one of those pieces.
that's
yes?
exactly right. So dealing with the air conditioning differently is one of those things. So by only focusing on having the centralized air at the middle school and high school, and then taking the all the window units that exist in the middle school and high school, and I think there are 92 of them, maybe. Yeah, I think
Let's say.
we calculated them. That then gives us the offset of $1.7 million, I believe.
Yep.
Yes? Okay.
So that's the air conditioning preview. Everyone,
Right, that's the preview that we were talking about.
98.
98, I was 6 off, right? So 98 air conditioners come from the middle school and the high school. They move into the windows of the elementary schools, and and what that now allows us to do is gives us a pretty significant offset financially, right? And enables the board to achieve the goal of cooling all the instructional spaces across the district. Is it the way the board ultimately wants to go? It's really about, at this point, where are the board's priorities? If we want to keep the centralized cooling as a priority, then that is going to cause us to make other decisions about scope.
but those
Right.
I guess my issue with those 98 units is those units are certainly not new or efficient or quiet or deal with the other air quality issues that the exchanges would. Plus, I assume a large part of that cost is the physical effort of putting them in. No?
We would,
No.
well, we would contract, what we would have to do is contract for that.
But
Not through the bond.
Not for the bond.
Not through the bond.
Not through the bond, okay.
I kept a little bit of money in the bond to prep the windows for the units, but the actual units would be done either in-house or contracted.
Okay, so it's not a question of bond, but it still is a question of
Sorry,
expense to taxpayers.
Right, we kept I think electric for it, for the have the window unit, have electric there ready for it, and the window
Okay.
opening ready, but the actual moving the units would be by somebody else.
So to me, the reason why I'm struggling with this, even though I like any idea of savings to fit this in, is that as fiduciaries, the idea of doing work for something that's a temporary fix and spending time and effort and money on that is generally something that I'm not in favor of. So doing it right once, to me, makes a lot more sense. And I think that, I'm not going to speak for Tim in any way, but I think potentially, for me at least, because I had those two things linked as well, lighting and air conditioning, is because lighting wasn't something that had come up in those previous conversations, but now is in this same box as Glen Head Nurses Station and locker rooms, which we did discuss as things that were going to bump up our cost. The lighting is in there. If that lighting was removed, if we kept everything in this proposal and got down to this third number, which is currently 38,966,498, remove the lights, added back the 1.7 for the air conditioning done with new units, we would be at 39,659, which is a number we can live with. That's a tax neutral number.
Okay.
Say it again?
So the first number we started with is the 30, again, I apologize, I can't see the
39,632.
colors, but the 39,772 is the first number where we were on June 18th. Then with adding these 4 items, library casework, fire alarm system, locker rooms, and stadium lighting, we get to 45,578.
Right.
We then came up with these following 8 to 10 subtractions, one of which is this cost-saving mechanism on the air conditioner, and that gets us to,
Which is the big one.
which is the big, well,
No, well,
it's the small.
It's a big one, but.
It's one of 3 big ones,
The
correct?
fire alarm is.
Correct. Which we should definitely discuss. I'm not getting to an endpoint
Right.
here. But that gets us, with taking away those things, to 38,966. If you took that 38,966 number, added back in the 1.702 for the air conditioning, and took out the stadium lighting, that number gets us to 39,659.
799.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
799,
I see what
exactly.
you're saying.
So,
Only one thing I have to clarify with that.
no, sorry.
If you look, unfortunately, the document you're looking at, I think it's on the upper right, it says 7/19/19.
Yes.
That was sent out first with the whole package. Right after we sent it out, John had heard back from his vendor on the fire alarm, so, at the high school, and we wound up having to add that back in as a $933,000 replacement.
That's why it showed up later in a later
So if
section.
you
That
look at
933 is
the
back
next
in there.
section,
Yeah.
the green's, off green, that has the extra 933,000
I
back
got
in,
it.
right.
Okay.
So that's really the one we should be working on. So basically, there's another million.
So that's why it's 46.5.
Exactly. So
Okay.
that extra one little 900 project is a lot, but it's needed if we do the additions at the high school, when we need that extra $1 million, yes.
Just curious, I couldn't find it just from right now looking. How much is the repair on the press box?
And John, maybe, I'm glad you brought that up because we spent some time on the field today talking about the press box, so I'd like you to just talk to the board a little bit about what's happened over there and how you've shored that up.
Right, so after the reorg meeting, there was some comments about the press box, so I made a point to go out there and look at it. So there was a question about the stairs leading up to the upper, they are worn, but there's wood, it's old growth wood. I jumped around on the stairs, they're very stable. We're gonna add an extra support to the railing. The deck upstairs, we were told there was holes, there was one hole. We're gonna sheet the whole floor upstairs with 1/2-inch plywood to address that. It needs a roof, which we were already planning on doing. And other than that, it's pretty stable. So the safety concerns are addressed. Everybody's assessment of the condition of a facility is different, but from my point of view and from talking to my staff, that is not as dire as it was made out to be.
12,000 was budget. 112,000 was budget.
John, you were talking about repairing the roof, so certainly of the consideration to the weight limit there, because that's what happens, people, get walked by people at the table.
Absolutely, we're gonna, take the old roof off, resheet the plywood and install a new roof back on.
So we'll be able to.
Absolutely, yeah.
But the 112,000 is the press
Press
box
box, including the
number?
soft costs and-
So it can be in this or it can be
Yeah, it's...
wherever. It's not necessarily a bond number. On the adds and subtracts, to change topics, I'm unclear about the issues around fire alarm systems in all the buildings, the urgency, I'm not clear on this.
All right, John, could you speak to that, please?
Sure, any specific building or just in general?
Let's take them all in
I-
general.
I really haven't heard any specifics at all about the urgency or the difficulties with the fire alarm.
All right, so let's start with the grade schools. The Seacliff Elementary School and the Glenwood Landing Elementary School fire alarms are functional. There's no life safety issues right now. What we have in those buildings are, when we did our additions in 2000, we had to put a newer style of fire alarm system in there and have that talk to the older fire alarm system there. So what we're seeing on occasion is we'll have an alarm condition and then it'll be difficult to reset the panels because one has to reset in a certain order. So the reason for considering fire alarm replacement in those cases was the functionality of the system on occasion and the potential for it to be an issue that impacts instruction. So we want to be forward-thinking and look to address that. When we look at the middle school and the high school fire alarm systems, those are driven by the additions that we are looking to do on the facility. If we're going to add physical space to each of those buildings, they require a much more, not so sparsely, used fire alarm systems. It's a more robust system. So we need to add that to the existing fire alarm panel. We've had assessments done on both panels at the high school and middle school, and we were told that there's no room for growth on those panels. So if you're going to add on to the building, you now have to look at redoing the fire alarm systems to allow for growth.
So the adding on to the high school that we've been talking about is the new corridor, potentially?
New
Some-
corridor, a potential front entrance renovation, small or large.
And that would overtax the current system, would require not just additions, which are not feasible with the current system, but an overhauling of the entire system.
Right, we're told the panel cannot allow for any more expansion.
And what would be the life and potential for additional growth on that new system?
I can't speak to that, but.
On a new simplex panel, which would replace this panel, we're looking at 15 to 20 years.
Okay.
Just to add on to what John said, the New York State Education Department now requires voice-based fire alarm systems for all the fire alarm systems in schools. A lot of schools throughout the state are just speaker strobe or horn strobe systems. Now it has to be like an intelligible voice system, which requires speakers in all your spaces, wires. So if you have an existing system and you're not touching that space or renovating that space, you can keep the existing horn strobe devices. Where you add onto a space, and I think the threshold is 50 occupants, it's when you have to install a voice-based system for that area. So any addition where we have a certain occupant threshold, we would have to install a new, a voice-based addressable system and then tie it back to the old system.
Hence, the middle school expanding the fire alarm system is $138,000, but to expand it to the high school is $933,000. It's nearly $1 million.
Well, that's a full replacement versus the middle school is just, we were able to expand
You're
that.
just able to expand, right? It's a huge difference.
And we're still looking into that number for the high school too.
Right.
Because originally we think we may be able to just replace the existing fire alarm control panel with a new simplex panel and then put a separate relay module for the new additions,
So that's potentially a big difference.
potentially. I've reached out to other vendors that provide the same equipment, but not the vendor that this district is using currently, and I'm waiting to hear back.
Touches on the corridor a little bit. Peter, can I ask you, because I had asked you a question about, so the corridor right now connecting these two wings is in there, but there was a suggestion that we reduce the scope a little bit and make it cut back a little bit.
Yes.
Let's talk about what you see as the reason for that and for the corridor in
Difference between
general.
it just being kind of a.
Sure.
on
And why the
versus an
corridor in general.
enclosed
Yep,
courtyard,
absolutely.
right?
Yep, I think that's a great question. Can we have some, does it help the board to have some photos of what we're talking about as well, as we're going through these?
Because the corridor initially came up when we were moving classrooms, and we were going to add classrooms on it.
Yes.
So when the classrooms are taken off, I think the question is, do we really need to spend $800,000 on a corridor?
Yeah.
As opposed to $800,000 on air conditioning
Right. Okay.
Right.
or
And
stadium
so-
lighting.
Right, so there's the issue of kids being able to move better through the building, which isn't huge, but also gaining,
Or breathe, take your
Yes.
choice.
yes, being able to have a better sort of building perimeter and having another interior courtyard that you can use for instructional purposes.
And I think, Marion, your question highlights what's underpinning all of this. We want all of these things, but since we can't have all of them,
We gotta pick.
yeah.
That's exactly right. So this is the, thanks, John. So can everybody see that okay? All right. So essentially, when the high school was built, it was built as 1 7 through 12 school, right? The J wing was the junior high school wing, and the S wing was the senior high school wing. That's where that nomenclature comes from.
The mystery is solved. I've been waiting all my life for
okay.
that, J and S.
All right. So, the building essentially, similar to the middle school, the building dead ends on either side, and students have to move, from one end to the other. The main corridor becomes very, very crowded with kids, and so what this does is it gives a secure passway from the J wing to the S wing, from the S wing to the J wing. It gives us the ability to create a secure courtyard right outside these windows here, and so it is largely it'll take kids far less time to get from one end of the building to the other end of the building without having to traverse all the way across or go outside in the rain. Or in the
It
snow.
creates one less place where you come back behind, someone comes back behind the building and there's just,
That's right.
lack of visibility. And
Yep.
everything else.
So this was when we talked with kids about students about this idea. They actually was one of the things that they became very excited about, right? Because it was an ability for them to connect from one side of the building to the other. It will be a real game changer in the way the flow of the building works. That said, when we looked at the cost of that, we said, all right, if we're looking for savings and how to offset some of these other projects, is it possible for us to build this in sort of 2 phases, right? Or 3 different ways. One was just putting a canopy across it, which doesn't really get you much. It doesn't shield you from anything. It just if the rain is coming down straight from above, or it will help you, but anything going sideways or whatnot, it doesn't buy you anything. The second option, excuse me, is to put the foundation in, make sure that and a roof on top of it, and have it open air. It would sort of have a similar feel to the front entrance, right? And you can get kids across, and then at some point, at a later point, for I think it's $350,000, you'd be able to hard enclose that. Okay. Ideally, it's closed. It is has air ventilation. It is secure, and so we feel that this is an important addition for the way the way the high school functions, because if you think about the way we've laid out the floor plan for how the building gets used, kids are less, students will be more concentrated in humanities section and a math and science section, and so that crossover to the different sides of the building will become, could potentially, I don't have any numbers to support this, but students will be likely to be back and forth more than they may have been otherwise. So that's the backfilling. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay. Rich? Sure.
If you close this, we say it's going to be a more secure situation. What's the plan for the schoolhouse?
So the schoolhouse, we would have doors that would go out toward the middle of the corridor. So you'd come out, so whatever side of the wing you came out of, you would go across, you'd come out the middle of the corridor through a set of doors and go over to the schoolhouse. Correct.
You see what I'm saying? So for me, then it doesn't really add any more security.
Right, because how do they get back in? So you have classes in the one-room schoolhouse. Now you have the kids going out the doors to the corridor to the one-room schoolhouse, and if you're really locking and there's only one way in and one way out, they're in the one-room schoolhouse, no way back in. Right?
Have you any thoughts on that?
I think that starts to tie into card access, and
Oh, right.
now we're dealing with that. But I think it was more about creating a more usable, secure courtyard that can also be used for instruction from the media center as well. And really saving on the loss of instructional time through the movement, through the building, from one end of the building to the other.
No, I get it. This is a more practical question, is that
I don't
right
have
now
a sense
the
of-
high school is functioning at capacity, and they
The,
use I know, they
no,
use the
no,
one-room schoolhouse for classes. My kids took classes in it.
Yeah.
I don't
So
have a
there's
sense to
a-
what extent we're using the one-room schoolhouse.
Right,
And
right.
because the capacity say didn't indicate we were at capacity at the high school, and I have no sense of what we use the one-room schoolhouse for. What are we
AP
planning on
Psych.
using it for this year?
Social studies.
Social
For
studies.
this year. I'm not saying we've never used it.
So you're all right. It is used, regularly throughout the day. It is primarily used for psychology and social studies classes. What we would have to do as we built the schedule moving forward is we'd have to be more strategic about what gets assigned to that room. I wouldn't want to compromise the benefits that we gain for the whole building based on the one-room schoolhouse. We could probably, we don't have an answer for you tonight, but we would be able to work through, some solutions to be able to address that concern, because it is definitely a concern. The one-room schoolhouse hangs out there in the middle of that field,
If we weren't using it for classroom space that we actually really need,
right?
then it would be another thing, but we actually need that
Yeah.
room for classroom space.
S-
So, I mean, if it were just like a thing that people came to visit,
Mm-hmm.
the elementary schools go over there when they do the colonial studies, it'd be
Yeah.
one thing, but it's actually a functioning classroom.
Yeah, that's-
So it creates a challenge.
The utilization study shows that it's used about 75%, which is...
It's a lot.
It's good, but it doesn't compare to what your general classrooms are used for, which is closer to 90% or 80%. So just to put things into perspective, it is used...
Except that we don't have an alternative where to put them, Tina. That's the problem.
I'm just giving you the...
I know, but I mean, when you take it, I understand, but the point is that it's actually used quite frequently, and we don't have an alternative location to hold those classes that are held in there, because if we did, we wouldn't have them in there.
Is that true? Or do
Especially
people
if the
just
other
prefer
classrooms
it?
are being used 90% of the time, that tells you that there's a need for that.
Right. The
space.
utilization is high. I don't want to dismiss by anything I say here, I don't want to dismiss the value and use of that building, right, because we use it. That said, I think this connecting corridor is very important to the flow and functioning of the high school. And so if we needed to figure out a way to deal with, we will need to figure out a way to deal with how that space is used. We will absolutely, there is a way to figure that out.
Yeah, but it brings me back to, okay, so we took out the classrooms there because originally Tina was putting 2 classrooms there,
Correct.
right? And the reason why she was putting 2 classrooms there is because we thought the classrooms that were being used for math, I think, were not properly sized. So it goes back to, is this something we should look at again in terms of if you're now putting in a corridor and you're taking away that space that's the one-room schoolhouse, which is not really the best use of that one-room
Oh, so you're talking about adding
schoolhouse.
classroom
There
space
should
back
be,
in.
should there be classroom space on that corridor? And should we be looking at putting in classrooms rather than some other item. And I know that's circular, but it didn't occur to me about the one-room schoolhouse until Rich just brought it up.
I do
And
like,
this discussion.
I do like the original idea of not just having that corridor, but having it be expansion of space. We had the conversation about capacity, and we're operating at 77 overall in this building, I think.
Close, yes.
Something,
778, somewhere's in there, yes.
so there wasn't necessarily the ability to absolutely justify the need for that. But I like the corridor in that it sets us up to be able to create that for the future, for future classroom growth, open space, or whatever we needed. And I still like it for that. Again, it's tough to find.
Right, what was
We're talking about
the,
growing the size.
this is like many iterations ago, Stu, right? So
Oh, that was in the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
And then Principal Cousins told Tina that she didn't take it out of air. She didn't just take it away because she felt like taking it away. She took it away, but there was a very valid reason. That there was sufficient space in those math classrooms. I can tell
Correct.
you from when my kids were there, they were in classrooms that did not have enough seating, and if you didn't get there in time, you were sitting on the windowsill. But we were functioning at a much higher capacity in those days, because in
enrollment
those
was
years,
higher.
there were 230, 240
Right.
kids per class, and you had 4 classes with 240 kids. You don't have those same numbers at the high school now.
So
So-
well, you know, when we look, any building, right, could benefit from more space. When we were talking about, you know, what do we need versus what, you know, what do we absolutely need versus what do we think would be good, you know, good to have or nice to have, those classrooms didn't rise to the level of, you know, these are things that we have to have for the building to function. But that said, they would be terrific to have, right? Because they would provide the school with a little extra flexibility with regard to, you know, scheduling classes. Sure. Right. What we would need to find out, right? Because we're, you know, what the cost of those $1.7 million.
Same with the air conditioning.
On top of the
That.
corridor.
It's
On top of the
classrooms and
corridor.
breakout rooms for about 2,400 square feet.
How close will that be to the one-room schoolhouse?
Proximity?
Yeah.
Well, those classrooms wouldn't cut out any further than the existing classrooms that are out there, so.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Because there are classrooms that would.
I'm trying to get a visual, but,
I'm like,
so if you drew a line
Should
from the
I-
back of there,
Pull
there's still
up-
enough room to
can we
have
just-
have
We have the
access.
pictures.
a satellite map,
Okay.
please.
Essentially, the two classrooms would leave the center of the corridor open so that you can still access the space.
And I'm like, if you left from those doors in the middle of the corridor and walked to the schoolhouse, I'm interested in how far that is.
Because you're thinking that if you
Because
just
in my
built
mind,
an
we're building a
additional.
big giant triangle, it's, you know.
It's right there.
Yeah.
So, but I have no spatial sense. I can see it, but how far is that, for God's sake?
Because there are a few issues, right? So you're using the one-room schoolhouse to a lesser extent. You're using the Victorian studio for classes,
Well,
right?
Yeah,
You
well,
have kids
always-
with IEPs taking their testing in the detention room. That's a fact. So if you're talking about where you're spending your money, I don't know, maybe it makes more sense to have classrooms than it does to have a fancy new front entrance. I don't know. I don't know. Or stadium lighting. You know, those are all things to consider.
That's the old one, the breakout room, but you could, but I don't think.
I would take 2 classes over stadium lighting.
I'm not.
I mean, there's flexibility in how we do that.
I guess I would, sorry.
It's like a stone
Did I cut you
square.
off?
That's how I
Okay.
would describe it.
I guess I would also, as we get to this point in the conversation, we haven't talked about the 2 other very large projects that are that are in
Yes.
flux.
Yes.
The entryway and, what's the other one?
The locker rooms or something?
The locker rooms themselves,
Locker
yeah.
rooms themselves.
So the locker rooms themselves and the
Right, so the
entryway.
locker rooms are triggered a lot of this discussion, right?
the
Like,
nurses'
do we,
station.
the locker rooms and the nurses station, right? Do we want to make the trade-offs? What are the trade-offs we're going to make? Yes, yes, we all agree. So, what trade-offs do we want to make?
So can I ask a question of the board, right? So John, if you could do me a favor, if you could pull up, go to the pictures that we have on the locker room pictures, right? Because I think it's helpful for, some folks have seen them, some folks have not. I think it's helpful for everybody to see them. So here are pictures of the men's locker room. So that's a bathroom. This is the team room. More team room, more team room, more team room, I believe. Bathroom, right. Right, that's the main locker room. So, there you go. That's the main locker room. So this is for the men. Keep going through, please. Yep.
That's the problem. That's the
Right.
fixtures in the bathrooms
Yes, the
are
shower.
gross.
Yes, exactly. So if you look at the ceiling and you look at the
And not being able to replace, I'm told, some of the parts.
that's correct. Right, keep going, John. That's the coach's office. This is another team room.
How many
Thank
team
you.
rooms are there?
Okay. So the men's space, the major, and so what's common to both the men's and the women's spaces are storage issues in both. right?
Is it enough of the quality? Storage for the kids or storage for like equipment or?
Both.
Mops and, okay.
Right, both. So for sports that have like a a golf bag, right? So if you show up at school with a golf bag,
Lacrosse, the same.
lacrosse, baseball, anything where you've got a big bag of stuff, right? That's where they have to put it. Right. Right, because there's just no place to put it. So in a redesign of the spaces themselves, because the spaces themselves are big, there is a lot of space in both places. So how that gets allocated is a exercise that we would go through, right? The use of the privacy is an issue in both in both spaces. So how do we accommodate for? So if you look, we'll probably see them in this one. Like
Aren't
there
they
are private
beautiful?
showers in the women's locker room.
Not one that I would use, though, or any other girl.
Right. And the truth of the matter is most high school kids aren't using the showers. There's a minimum number of them you have to have by code, but they're not, the kid.
Maybe that's a question of the cart and horse.
Right, but for like some kids, for athletes that come in the morning,
Right, or
they'll
there's
use
now
them.
0 period PE.
Yes, but they are not used. They are not used. Right, they are not used frequently. So what I would say in advance of this is I would not have the board feel compelled to put in banks of showers. I would stick with the code and what you need to do and use the space for other priorities that you have because kids simply won't use them. The other thing that to address privacy and is you can figure out a way to build in private changing rooms for kids that they can flex in and out of. But keep going, John. I'm sorry. So this is you'll see that the women's locker room is in better shape in general than the men's locker room. But regardless, there are some humidity issues in there. There's when it gets because of the flow of the air.
Or not.
Or not exactly, that you get some pooling of water on the floor in the locker room.
In this area, they were changing it in the hallway while people were walking past, because that's where those lockers are.
Right, so they try not to assign students to those lockers because they are.
Normally it's like lockers and benches, but this is actually a hall.
This is the,
that has-
exactly. They're all the same. You'll see that all of the lockers are the same size, and what we may want to consider is, varying size lockers. So you have some lockers that are cubes, like we saw in the men's locker room, some that are a little longer, some, so you have some differentiation of,
There's a limited number of long lockers, and those
Correct.
are assigned to like the lacrosse
correct.
team girls.
That's
with
exactly
field
right.
hockey.
Are there team rooms within them?
Yes, there are. Yes, there are. And so and then in the mix of both of the spaces, if they're, depending on the color of the lock, is whether it's like a general use or a team use. So generally speaking, this is a project that, that's where Michelle Cochran has some space to work, and we don't need all those lockers for coaches. Staff bathroom, that's another team room, folks.
How many team rooms
I think there were 2 in each, right?
So you see the red block is the sports and the black block is generally.
Right.
So there are 2 team rooms in each. The team rooms are roughly equivalent, or some are, what's the deal?
More or less, yeah, more or less. So what I would, what we would do is, if the board decided you wanted to move forward with this, that we would, as we, be very much in concept right now, but as the plans start to come together, Tina would specify the space and tell us how she thinks that we would use it more optimally, right? Because they're very long, narrow spaces.
Also meet with the athletic, leaders and coaches and talk to them before doing anything, but certainly we've done plenty of locker rooms more recently.
Right.
That are just laid out specifically to address function of the teams and the users, but also privacy. I mean,
Right.
I think that's
It's a
big
key.
factor.
Yep, it's key.
Walking into the locker room and making sure that you're not in view of anybody who's changing.
Right.
So there's plenty to look at.
And use of the coach's office for, the coach's office should be strategically positioned within that space, so supervision can be provided, right?
Is the coach's office the same as the physical education staff office?
No, I'm using them interchangeably. Yeah,
Yes.
they are the same.
No, I don't know.
They are the same. I'm using them,
But he said that.
I'm using the terms interchangeably. Yes.
We should remember that every single kid in school uses locker room.
Every single kid uses a locker.
Yes. So it sounds to me that the board this is a project the board would like to
Yes.
take into the scope. Is there anybody who disagrees? Okay, so I think if we can work with that assumption, right, that takes your 39,772,029 number and adds $4,098,000 to your project. So we have to talk a little bit about.
I don't
Yeah,
want to interrupt you, but
please.
Can you just tell us a little more specifically about where we will be after spending $4,098,000 with those locker rooms?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Once again,
The entire space is gutted, and you think of it as a big square or rectangle, and you create a modern, functional.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Accommodating transgender needs and
The
those
sky
privacy
is the
needs that are going
Okay.
to be, at some point, we're going to have to do.
Sky is not the limit. 4.09.
do whatever you want.
Yep.
And working around some storage rooms that would abut into the rectangle, so it's not a complete clear
Yeah.
rectangle.
Right.
Okay.
Well, yeah, and of course, we would try to design it efficiently so we can reuse,
Right.
major walls, but we have to step back and take a clean look at it, obviously.
Mhm.
But the cost covers a complete gut renovation.
Okay.
Right. All right, so why don't we have Stu add that into the spreadsheet? And so we'll have a new base.
Great.
With which to work from, right? That was a good discussion.
Should we have one about the entryway? Which is
Uh,
another huge ticket?
Yes, what I might think, maybe
Did we
the,
finish the AC discussion
I'm not sure.
sufficiently, or no? I'm like,
I'm not sure yet. However, I was thinking that it might make sense for us to spend a few minutes talking about the Glen Head Nurse
By all
Station.
means.
Right? Because I think that was something that the board was.
And I was unclear, yeah, so.
Yeah, so that was something the board was very universally interested in having happen. And we wanted to show you some pictures. I think all of the board members were on the building
was fun.
tour last year that we did in August.
I was not on the building tour last year, but I was on the building tour for the prior bond. My
Okay.
kids went to Glen Head, so
All
I'm
right.
intimately
So you
familiar
know-
with it.
you
So
know-
picture where it was and
Right.
10% worse.
And it's,
Yeah, it was not.
okay. So the Glen Head nursing room is just an old space that doesn't function well. So here are some pictures of the space itself. It actually, when John and I were looking at these, I was like, John, it like in person, it looks a lot worse.
The
Right.
big issue is that there's no student privacy.
Well, that's
at
exactly
that.
right. So we're going to show the board some of that now, right? So this is the main room.
No.
Go ahead, John.
Right, so the attendance person is there, the nurse is at that desk. The students come in, the attendance person assesses them, the nurse greets them. They're mostly treated here on this couch here.
Oh, sure.
Which you can imagine if there's another student in here, privacy is of a great concern in this current layout. Then, and this is looking out to the hallway from the back of the room. Then if you
There's the
move-
bathroom.
If you move, can you go next one?
It's a beauty.
I'll get it there. So if you look to your right, which is this picture, now you're looking into the bathroom from the nurses. So in the back between the bathroom is the sick room. So if they have a child that needs to rest, they're put in that back room. So if somebody needs to now use that bathroom, they close that door and they close this door. Now the nurse is completely cut off from the person in the back room. There's the toilet.
Can we be
There's our
clear?
only-
Is there
There's the
privacy
only
in?
sink.
Is there privacy in any other nurse's office? Like if you're in Seacliff, it's like 2 beds side by side. It's just one room. Like I don't see it. The privacy issue does not strike me as unique at all. The bathroom setup does.
So the nurse at Seacliff has her own sink in the room and a separate bathroom. Once somebody's in the bathroom and closes the door, the nurse at Glen has.
I'm acknowledging the bathroom issue is different, but the privacy issue is not.
Okay. And then this is looking into the area where the children would rest, and that's looking from the bed out towards the nurse. So the nurse has to constantly look through a long tunnel of an area to see the children in the back. And then there's this door, which is in that back room, and then if you open that, it enters into, this is the lactation room we built, and then a faculty bathroom, which is dated as well.
So it is, I don't think it's disputable that the space needs to be taken care of, right?
And-
It's not
and
okay
it
for a
keeps
sick
getting
kid to
put
be
off.
closed
Every
off at a
bond-
weird door and the nurse
Right.
can't see the kid. Right.
Every bond, it gets put off.
Exactly. So here's what we, sure, John.
Sorry,
Yeah,
just
please.
One more thing,
Yeah.
it's location obviously, right? The main office is way down the hallway by the front entrance and people have to walk
All the way
into
through the
building.
school
That's exactly
and
right.
to the bowels of Glen Head.
Yes.
Right.
And someone picking up their sick child.
Correct.
And then marching the sick child out. And sometimes sick children don't necessarily make it all the way to the front door. Yeah.
And the
Right.
attendance person isn't there full-time because she also is a lunch monitor.
Right.
So she goes from being the attendance person, and then come lunchtime, so for the lunch periods, she's not there. So the nurse or whoever is rotating in as the nurse that is subbing in is there by themselves.
Right.
And then she goes back after lunch,
Right. So here's what.
rather
go
than
ahead,
being
Tina.
a
I'm
full-time
sorry.
aide like we have at the middle school and high school, which is what she should be.
No, I'm not on this slide.
I get paid as such.
I was unclear about this.
Yeah, it should be on there.
Oh, okay.
So we
So one of the things we looked at to include that, the scope of renovating the nurses' room, but to try to cut down on some of the other costs at this particular school was, we looked at removing the work that we were planning to do up at the balcony, and that was to provide a couple additional offices that were required and storage. So we took that scope out. And so this is the plan on 7-Eleven that you saw at the last board meeting. And that's the nurse's suite that we had removed. We were still renovating the bathrooms, and then there was some work up in the front of the building with the vestibule. And then you can see the small floor plan on the right-hand side. Above the balcony, there was some work up there that we were doing to accommodate a couple of offices, a social worker and a counselor, and then storage space. So because we understood that this was important, we looked at, if you go to the next plan, John, I looked at reorganizing it a little bit differently so that I could pick up the space I needed for those additional offices. And in doing so, move the nurse's suite now adjacent to the main office and the principal's office, picked up the room for the social worker, the counselor's office, the transgender bathroom, and then converting the nurse's suite to the OT-PT for potentially a interchangeable classroom.
So then what you're doing on the front of Glen Head is there's a classroom there, there's a small room on that corridor, and there's a children's bathroom that is shared with the faculty, which has been a big dispute. So what you're existing. So now you're going to take that classroom out, right? Because now you're going to put in a nurse's suite, and then maybe that other small room is going to be your social worker counselor.
Yes, we're going to do a little bit of work there. The social worker will fit into that space, and then there's plumbing already in that location, so we can put the
Right.
transgender bathroom and the other faculty bathroom in there and have it.
Right, because there's a bathroom there and a water fountain,
And
right?
the gutted old nurse's suite will become that classroom. So they'll swap, so they'll have the
Becomes
space.
the OTP.
That's correct.
No.
Or interchangeable classroom, yes.
No, the classroom that you're taking out is a regular classroom, but you probably don't need it right now because you have a lot less classes than you did.
It's used, I think, right, it goes back and forth. Yeah.
Oh, it is? Okay, it used to be a regular classroom.
So it's just, it took a little bit of reorganization, but the scope we were able to remove is on the upper floor,
Right, which was a lot of,
which actually was a lot of cost for what the use was.
right.
Yeah, so that's a much better layout, I think.
That's a 261.
Yeah,
Hopefully
that's much
for some
better.
future generation to figure out what to do with that space.
Right. It was very costly to deal with. And so what we, in terms of the funding of this, if you look down towards the bottom of your sheet, that $423,128 to renovate that was part of the capital reserve. It is, we've allocated it to phase 2. It will be fully funded at the end of this fund balance cycle. And so what we would do is have all the design work happen through, and the state approvals go through, tied to the bond. But the actual funding of it would come from the capital reserve, not from the bond
So
itself.
when
Does that
would
make
the
sense?
actual work be done?
Simultaneously.
But what year? Because all the bond work is not going to be done at the same time.
That's right.
So I think once we define the scope.
Then
Right.
you'll do the
that's
phasing?
the next
Yes.
step,
Yes.
Yeah, which should happen, soon, because once we start kind of delivering it to the public, that's something everybody's going to want to understand.
Right.
Bob, Olivia and I did talk about that briefly after the last meeting, so it's not new to us right now. It's just a matter of what's being done in what building, and that will really refine
Right.
the phases.
The idea of moving all that non-instructional functionality of this building to that area makes a lot of sense.
Makes tons of sense.
And
Yes.
the idea of putting offices in that balcony, I'm just going to say this because that gathering room is what they use for indoor recess because they
Mhm.
don't have an auditorium.
Yep.
So, and that's one of the only places they have for indoor recess. So it's not exactly ideal to put offices in that space.
Yep. So in terms of your scoping, it enabled us to take $261,000 out of the project to offset some of the other things.
I think we can put a hard check next to that one.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. That's great. Great.
Give
Okay.
him a year. Peter Roof will figure out something cool to do with that auditorium space.
My money would be on that as well. Okay. So what did you think? What do you think you wanted to take next? Did we want to go back to air conditioning? Did we want to just quickly? If you look at the bottom on those offsets, where you've got the exterior wall repairs at the admin building, interior door hardware replacement, and the security scope work, we just thought that as we were trying to move this, scope down, that those were numbers that we could manage within
budget.
within the budget, and so we didn't need to, put those in the bond. So, as long as there's, disagreement on those, on those things, we can put check marks next to those as well.
Are you comfortable? I mean, you already kind of touched on the fire alarm, which is number 2, which is a big ticket.
Yes.
You reassured us, you reassured me, that that's not in any way putting anyone in danger. Everyone is going to be safe with this. It's just a question of
Timing.
timing.
Yes.
So to me, that seems like a good check. We can save 1.1 there.
Anybody else? Okay. I need to just be refreshed on, as we move down that list, the reducing the cost of the reading room at Seacliff. Just someone refresh me on the details of this, please.
Oh, that was just, Tina had just clarified what the actual scope was, so the price I had originally given was too high. I just basically lowered. So we just take that, because that's just basically clarifying what the cost is. It was just too high to begin with, yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Moving down, just the faculty planning renovations. This was when we were moving things around the building and doing the designs. There was a point in time where we needed to do some faculty planning room renovations that, because the scope shifted, those that $166,000 was no longer needed.
That's correct.
Right? Okay. Okay, so we've got the vestibule, the entrance vestibule. And the air conditioning probably are the two big lifts right now.
And bleachers are.
And bleachers, right. And bleachers are not tiny. So, of those, right. And we still have the stadium lighting hanging out there. All right, so Stu, you have a good sense of where we are with this, right? So while we start to talk about, so the nurses station renovation is in. The locker rooms are in. The Glenwood Landing Seacliff elimination of the fire alarm system, that 1.7 will remove that from the scope. The $40,000 at the reading room will remove that from the scope. The middle school faculty planning renovations will remove from the scope. And then those admin building costs, the $67,000, $19,000, and $44,000 at the bottom of the chart there. We'll remove those from the scope as well. Okay, and then and then in addition to that, we also have to talk about the ADA ramps, right? So we have air conditioning, the ADA ramps at each of the, at Seacliff and Glenwood Landing, and the front entrance. Does that sound right to everybody?
Yeah, I just have one question.
Sure.
What's been added, it says library casework for the 3 elementary schools. Can you just explain?
Sure. Those are all the stacks and the furniture for when those libraries get renovated. We originally we had thought about doing that through the budget, but it's a big number to have to get to the end of the project and try to figure out where to get $600,000 from, to, we're going to have these beautiful new spaces, and then we don't want to put the furniture that wasn't designed for the space back into the space. So that's what that is. Okay, it just completes the, normally it's typical to put, right, would you say it's typical to put all the casework into the scope of a bond, right? Sometimes you would pull out some of the furniture.
Loose furniture.
Right. But this is like all your built-in stacks and all that. Yep.
One more clarification on the bleachers. That also includes netting to block foul balls from the softball, baseball.
Right.
Baseball field. Right now, they're up as high as John's able to do, but to make them proper length to really block it needs to be engineered, it needs footings, it needs the proper, so in the stadium extension, the bleacher extension, we included the netting as well.
Now, that's an interesting question. So we take out the bleachers, which I'm okay with, but we still have the foul balls, right? So that really, to me, needs to be addressed. So where are we finding that money if you're telling me we need to put in footings in order to get the correct height for foul balls so they're not plonking people in the stadium in the head?
So if you look at the second page of the 723 document, you'll see that we've given the board a few different options here with regard to the bleachers. All right, so you could have the bleachers in there at you could add 250 seat bleachers, right? And that the cost of that is roughly $187,000, $186,894. If you add it with the netting, right, that cost becomes $224,273. So the difference between that is minus.
Right, so I don't think we really need the bleachers, but we do need the netting.
So the question, Marianne, can you just do the netting for 38?
Right, that's my question.
Stu?
You had mobilization.
Say, why
and
not?
all that
Yes.
Yeah, I have
stuff
to-
in that number, right?
I have to double check like how much we need. I forgot how we came up with that number, but I need to just double check like the length and measure, but I would say somewhere in that range, 40 to 50 somewhere.
Right, because we need to correct that.
I think you're
the-
100%
If
right.
you're on the baseball field, the bleachers, we have very limited bleachers, but they're never full. And at most sporting events, they're not full. So I think it's fair to take out the bleachers and save that money, but put in the netting so that we address the safety concern, right?
Can we just do the netting as a budgeted item?
Right,
Yeah,
$50,000
yes.
Instead of making it.
Yes.
right.
Right.
You don't have to make it part of the budget, well, the bond, but we need to address it, is my point. I don't want it to get lost, and then we have an issue.
Right, that's a health and safety issue.
Right.
Right, so Olivia, is that, maybe I would want to talk with you tomorrow about the extent to which we can do it now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, because you and I were talking about this morning a little bit.
They hit those balls hard.
Yeah, yes, they do, which is a good thing,
They're impressive.
right? In some
Certainly
respects,
don't want,
right?
yes.
I mean, it
We don't want
depends.
someone to find out firsthand just
I-
how hard they hit the ball.
I agree. So
We don't want to
so
measure velocity. via-
That's not a good physics experiment.
that is true. So we will take the unless there's any objection, we will take the bleachers
There is none.
out of the scope of the project altogether.
There is none.
And we will take the bleachers with the netting out of the scope of the bond. We will work on funding that.
We'll put the netting somewhere.
Netting in.
Okay? So Olivia, you're
Great.
keeping track of this, yes?
Yes.
Okay. So bleachers
Netting,
out,
yes.
Stu. Bleachers with netting out. The
The foul ball netting is going to somehow be.
general fund.
Magically taken care of in the
Right.
budget. It's my
Okay.
understanding. I can't believe it.
All right. The thing about the I'm sorry. If I'm confusing you, stop me. But if we think about those ADA ramps, right? The Seacliff ADA ramp is very much tied to the entrance vestibule, right? And so it does make sense as we're dealing with the Seacliff entrance vestibule to deal with the ADA accessibility ramp at the Seacliff School. At the Glenwood Landing School, we went over there and looked at the site. The ADA ramp to get into the Glenwood Landing School is essentially 15, 20 feet away from the front entrance of the school.
Have wings. So they just
Right, so you go in, so if you're looking at the Glenwood Landing School, do we have a picture of the Glenwood Landing School somewhere? There's got to be something here. So if you're looking at the front entrance of the Glenwood Landing School and then you look to the right, there is a wheelchair ramp that brings you into the front of the school. Once you go in that door, thank you, there is an elevator right in front of you that brings you straight up that half level, and then you are essentially 3 classrooms away from the main office, right? The Seacliff School is very different, right? If you were going to get a person into the building in a wheelchair, you have to go in through Franklin, right? And
You have to go through the whole building to get
correct. You have to
the
go through
front-
this. So it is
front office.
it's very different. So our suggestion to the board is leave the ADA ramp on the front entrance of the Seacliff School because you can tie it to the vestibule work and the work that needs to be done to make all that happen, and eliminate the Glenwood Landing ramp from the front of the building. It's $149,000.
You're saying to move it 15 feet?
It just doesn't make a lot of sense.
About the ADA ramps, I did want to bring up too, in terms of, so at the Seacliff School, obviously there is a way they can get in the building. It's in the back or whatever. But I think it's possible that as part of this thinking about ADA accessibility, that we might want to also think about how many ways are there for someone in a wheelchair, on crutches, whatever it is, to get out of the building
Yes.
in an emergency, and if there's really only one,
At the Seacliff School.
wherever it is. I'm saying I can't in my head calculate all of this, but
I hear you,
can have
yes.
situations,
Uh-huh.
whether it's a routine fire drill or whatever it is, that you need to get everyone out
Yep.
quickly, and so that could be part of our thinking too.
Right, that would,
That if we have really limited, easy ways to get out, then maybe we need another way to get
I
in.
think that's true of any school though, because I'm thinking about.
I agree,
I'm
any
thinking about
school.
Glen Hedge, you have to get into the elevator of death if you're on the second floor.
We actually have a little heavy duty, but it's only one. We bought some people an evac chair, and what it is it's you can place a special needs person in it, and with because of the design of the chair, it allows you to go downstairs. Very little effort, it's balanced, so and with some training, which we're going to do, that chair will be available. So we're kind of already thinking that, but it is only one.
Right, so I'm just
So-
saying I'm saying for across all schools, to your point, another way to think about this is ways out.
Each school has an evac. Glen Head, because they wanted to replace the one at Glen Head. I said, well, just like you said, if it's an issue at Glen Head, it's an issue at Glenwood Landing and Seacliff. So we want to
so this doubles the ability to accomplish what you're suggesting.
Right.
Absolutely. At Glen Head, I'm not sure how many ramps are there.
One
There's one.
at the front, but the elevator is all the way around at the back of the school. So if you're on the second floor, there is an exit out to the parking lot or out to the other side of the building from the elevator, but it doesn't have a ramp in it.
Right.
And there are
Either
other
way.
issues too about just how you schedule classes and where kids are in the building.
That's right.
But
That's right. So if you go back to Glenwood Landing for a second, John, that'd be helpful. Thank you. So I'm not sure if the, where's the entrance around back on this, by the back parking lot?
There's two, actually. This is ramps by the auditorium, and then if you come in, this door here, there's another.
Right, exactly. So you
They're
have,
more on level. There's
Yeah.
more ways in the Glenwood Landing School
that's
to
exactly
get
right.
out
the-
because of the
Yeah.
way it's laid out. The Glenhead School, because it's a
It's-
true two-story school,
Mhm.
there's only one ramp, and it's by the front entrance to the school, which is here. The ramp is here, and school goes around, right? So there is a door here into the parking lot, and there are doors over here out into the area between the school and the field. But the elevator is all the way over here. So if you're on crutches or in a wheelchair, if you needed to get out of that building, you would have to go down the elevator here, where most of the classrooms are, right? And you'd have to go all the way around from the elevator out.
I mean,
Because
Right.
there's
and
no
the
way to
Seacliff
do it without
school
stairs.
exits are obviously kind of surrounded by stairs.
Right. So the what I think for the, I wouldn't suggest that we add more ramps at this point to the scope of the work.
It's just a
Yeah, no,
conversation.
I no, I hear you. I agree with
Never
you.
even thought about it.
Yeah,
Until
me-
this
Right,
discussion.
right, and I'm sort of like, like with the Seacliff School, we've been discussing like adding the ramp in the front. There's something, it feels something incredibly just inherently awkward about it, and we're like, well, they in the back, but it's another exit.
Right.
You have the extra one at Glenwood, because when you were building the addition, they added it into the scope. Similar, like you're thinking now of adding a ramp in scope of the work that you have here. Interesting enough, SED is an ADA code is getting in, but they really don't address getting out.
No, it's actually more about access at the front door.
I think it's coming. I'd be surprised if it doesn't happen at some point. Like, there's just more stuff. There's more advocacy in the media about these issues.
Yeah. So our suggestion is basically leave the Seacliff accessibility to the front in, and take the Glenwood Landing ADA ramp out of the scope.
And at Glenwood Landing, right, you're
It's
saying
right
it's a
there.
marginal difference. There are other points of
Right.
Entry and exit.
entry
Right.
and exit.
If you enter, when you enter Glenwood Landing, if you come in through the existing ramp, right? Yep. So to get to the main office is right there.
It's right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you go to Seacliff, please.
Oh, yeah, it's
Right. So if you go to
on the
Seacliff,
opposite side of the building.
right, you come in through there. You go up the elevator. Right, and then you get to the main office, which is there. So you essentially have to get through the, get through the whole school. So
And that's the only way. All of those other
that's correct.
doors have stairs up or down, even if it's just a few. It's
That's
all stairs.
That's correct. So we really do think, yep. So we really do think it makes good sense to have that
Yes.
ramp in the front of the.
And I'm
Seacliff
sure architects are going to come up with a design that makes all of Seacliff literally fawn over the new entrance of this historic building that they are deeply invested in, and will somehow incorporate the ongoing memorial to the tree that we lost a year ago. And
Now, we actually, the landscape design was trying to look at it, and we just didn't want to push it until we knew.
Right.
yes, but it's like, oh my God, they care so much about
So in short,
things.
personally, I agree with the recommendation, Peter.
Okay. Yes. All right. So Steve, we're gonna keep take the Glenwood Landing ramp out, keep the Seacliff ramp in. Okay.
No, we've had one tree already die at Glen Head that provided tremendous shade when my kids were there. It was a big beach, and it's gone, and now we have another one that's going. So
Sad.
there's going to be absolutely no shade on that side of the building.
Yes, no, the beech tree disease that's been going around is horrific. And,
It's horrific.
right, and we have
And
to
it
do
makes
and
that
very
building
dependent
look
on
very
these
ugly.
Giant beech trees, and we do, you know.
It was a big thing at Glen Head, too, when the beech tree went.
Okay. So that leaves us with air conditioning, the entrance vestibule at the
Not being
front.
too dependent on a single kind of tree, because
Right.
sometimes there's a.
It was it was 100 years ago. They weren't thinking about it. They were just planting a tree.
There was that chestnut tree devastation
Yeah.
at the time.
Okay. Please.
And there's the understanding that the library air condition at the middle school will be the general fund at the future date, right?
It has to be tough. We talked about this today.
I thought it was, and that was in the capital reserve.
It is. Yes, it is.
No. Capital reserve?
The middle school library air conditioning is not.
No, it says general.
Oh, yes, that's general fund. Right.
So we're going to air condition everything else and not the middle school library after we redo
no.
it?
We're going to plan it, put it in the phase when the library renovation happens, and fund it out of the general fund with the $800,000 out of the general fund, out of the 1600 code.
You better hope you have it, because it doesn't make sense to do. I said this at the last meeting. At the last meeting, we were told, I'm sure I was told that it was coming out of, that it was in the capital reserve when you took it out. That was what we were
I
saying.
think I said that, and that was a mistake.
Okay, because I just think
I always
it's-
thought it was in the capital reserve
Okay,
as
it's
well.
ridiculous to renovate that library and spend $3.3 million on an addition and not have that library, for certainty that library air conditioned. The update to the high school and the middle school libraries,
anyone
I
disagreeing?
think, no, I just want to make my point. Just let me make my point. The renovation, the reason why I'm in favor of the renovation to the high school and the middle school libraries in particular is because they then become places, and now we have additional security on staff that's here, where students can congregate, where they're not out on the streets or the sidewalks where only trouble can happen, right? So if you're not, there's no guarantee you're going to have $800,000 in the budget for that air conditioning. I would think that one of the priorities would be to ensure that we have funding in place when we renovate a middle school library. More important than, middle school and high school is more important than any other library.
Even though I cannot guarantee it, we do always
raising my hand.
have at least
President, you don't have to.
$800,000 in the regular budget every year
Well,
for capital projects.
yes, yes.
And
But-
because we did not also do, because we have to leave room this year and next year, double it up because the debt service has not been, we don't have a debt service. This year we doubled it to 1.6.
Right, I understand
So
that.
there's in 2021, we will have, we have to make up the $1.6 million again. And that is where I think we can put the $800,000 for the air conditioning. We can put it there, move the money into capital project fund, and wait until all the designs are done. We can do that.
Presuming that the
put a
budget's passed.
sharper-
Presuming that the budget's passed and that you don't have.
Well, sure, the entire conversation, everything we talk about based on the budget's passing. But to put a sharper point on it, like as the debt falls off, like we have been intent upon putting the 800,000 in the budget because, so that we don't create a tax cliff, like that's been our whole goal. And so we're saying we're essentially earmarking what we need to do to prevent the tax cliff towards this air conditioning project.
Listen, if you're going to put in stadium lighting for $1 million, put that in your budget rather than, and make sure you have the 800,000 secured in a bond for air conditioning for a middle school library.
I think that's an issue of timing. I thought that was an issue of trying to do it when you do this other work, and by putting in the budget, you're controlling when it's happening, like the stadium lighting and anything that's happening in the bond could be happening over a very long time horizon. None of this is happening tomorrow.
Could be 3 years, 4 years, depending
It
on
could
the
be
scope of the
10.
bond. No, it's not going to be 10.
Parts of the bond?
It's not 10.
I don't think 10.
It's not 10.
It's not going to be tomorrow.
No, definitely
It's
not.
not 10. It's not
Somewhere-
never planned to be 10. It's usually planned 3-4 years.
Somewhere in between the two, I promise.
I don't think it's all going to be done in 3 by any stretch.
We did additions, major additions to the elementary schools in 3 years.
Oh,
And the last bond we did in 4 years.
Olivia, on that note, because you were in this section, the middle school locker rooms are happening in the capital reserve, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Because they're worse than the high school locker rooms.
That's correct.
Yeah, we have even changed the estimate.
Okay.
So we have, yep, so we have, so the way that will work this year is when we do our budget vote in May, we'll have a second proposition to expend the money out of the capital reserve. And what we would do is we would get voter authorization to fund the renovation of the boys and girls locker rooms at the middle school at $2.37 million approximately, and to fund the Glen Head nurses room at $423,128. That will be funded this year.
Great.
Okay, so then once we have the authorization from the voters to access the funding, then we have flexibility on how that gets phased in. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay, and so what we would do with the idea behind the air conditioning, right, is that we would ensure that as we scope the project out, right, that becomes part of a phase of the project where that additional $800,000 of debt service is available. Now, if the board's more comfortable, because we haven't agreed, just I don't think the board has agreed to leave in or take out the stadium lighting
No,
at this
we
point.
have not.
Right. So
That's a big
right, that's a big question mark still. So, and I think before we get there, right, I think we need to have a conceptual conversation about what's happening at some revisions that we want to present about the high school. We still need to address the air conditioning piece. Those are the two big items, and then the stadium lighting, I think, is hanging out there as well. But we will, at some point, the board is going to need to know where you are in terms of, what is this costing you so far?
Yeah, I was shocked at the price of the band room. The orchestra room wasn't as shocking to me because it's not a music room. But the cost estimate for the band room, because what you're basically doing is you're taking out the risers, right? And putting in more flexible seating at the band room.
More or less a renovation. Risers, the acoustic treatment.
It's the acoustics. That's what I want to know. That's what I want to know because I couldn't. Like the orchestra one, it made sense to me because I know there are no acoustics in there because it wasn't designed to be a music room. I would have thought that the band and the choral rooms would have had some acoustics in it. No?
Yes, they would. Yeah.
But I would have thought they already had them in there. But no?
Well, the band, we're reorganizing the band room. I mean, we're essentially.
You're ripping it out.
Turning, yeah.
Yeah.
So it will have essentially new everything.
When you tear the risers out, there's ducts underneath
Okay.
there, so there's that. Right now, on that top step, you access the storage at this level. It is now at that level when you take the riser out, so you have to adjust to
All
that.
right, because the cubbies are around there.
Yeah,
Okay.
There's a lot more scope in that room than just
riser and no issues.
Yeah, and we're also opening up the space so that it's a more useful space. It becomes a bigger space. And in fact, all of it.
Sorry.
Coral room is probably the one that stays most intact.
So they have kind of temporary risers right now in that coral room, right? And are you doing something different? Are you changing the risers in there?
The coral room,
The risers are out.
the risers are out, yeah.
Already.
Okay.
But if, I don't have an existing floor plan, but if you were to compare the band and orchestra rooms, like on the existing to what this is, the spaces are much larger and they're really suited to hold the amount of students.
So you're changing the dimensions of the 3 rooms?
Yes. Except for choral. Choral, the size of choral will stay the same, band and orchestra will grow. Because we're taking out some of the smaller spaces that are, the medium.
Oh, the media labs in between, okay. And like, how can it be changing the dimensions?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry,
I got
band is
it.
growing and orchestra's growing?
Yes.
In size.
They're better proportioned spaces as well.
Well, they'll be formulated for their purpose.
Exactly.
Well,
And
no,
then
the
you'll
band
see
room
the
is
media
formulated for
lab
its
is being
purpose.
relocated to the space adjacent to orchestra, which is now, I think, maybe an attendance room.
And since we're in this section, for the renovated community room, that's the one that whatever number that is.
So the community, that space is actually the existing main office space now. Right? So we were taking, in this scheme, when we were relocating the main office into new construction, we were renovating that space into a community room. The space, as soon as you walk into the front doors, that's across the hallway where essentially they hold
Correct.
receptions.
Our community room is the orchestra room. That was our community room for many years. Oh, the alumni room, which is where, that was the alumni room, which
That's
is
why I
now where
confused
the
myself
orchestra
with the
is.
Right. Yeah, so when we originally scoped this, we thought it would be good to bring that back, right? And so we took a piece of the existing main office to put that community room back into play. But when we got the cost estimates on the front entrance that you saw at the last board meeting, right?
Which is, maybe if you go to the next slide, I think I summarized that.
Yes.
So, the original option that, again, from July, was that we were constructing a new main office suite with a new secure entrance vestibule and filling in that kind of triangle with bathrooms to support the auditorium and some of the public functions. And then also taking down the existing canopy and reconstructing a new one that had more coverage. And so this was to suffice for a safe and secure entrance that's attached and adjacent to the new main office. As we started to look at, trying to add in the locker rooms and where we can sort of pull back with other scope items, the entrance came up as an option. So I looked at still solving the security issue, but leaving the main office in its current location. So if you go to the next slide, which is just a sketch, but what you can see is that we are leaving the main office where it is, building out a new student vestibule, essentially under the existing canopy and with some extension, and then building out the area that says the main toilet rooms, which would have a security office next to it and then a secure visitor entrance next to it. So it solves the entrance issue and the secure vestibule concern.
And the toilet issue.
And the bathrooms. And it leaves the main office in its current location. So we don't have to reconstruct a new main office.
And what happens to the canopy?
So in this, what we were imagining in this scenario is that we would essentially reface the canopy. The structure would stay. We probably would pull the brick down, reface it, just to give it a fresh look and a new identity to the high school itself.
But it wouldn't. The dimensions wouldn't change.
No, the coverage would stay the same. The only difference is that your interior space is closer now because we pull the vestibule out further and create the secure visitor entrance to the left of the main student vestibule. Is it clear? I mean, I can point.
I got it. That makes more sense to me than spending all that money on an alumni room, though. How we lost the alumni room in the beginning is beyond me.
Right. So doing all that, I'm sorry, you're going to say something.
No, I really like the original plan, but something has to go. And so breaking it down into the most crucial elements, which are the toilets are just
Horrendous.
Yeah, horrendous. Thank you. Horrendous. But also increasing security, increasing some coverage so there's room for people to come in and wait without getting drenched or overheated. And maybe not needing to spend the extra money renovating an office that could use work, but still works and isn't horrendous.
No,
it's not.
It's actually
It gets a
functional at the
little bit
front
of a
office.
facelift.
The front office is not the problem. The problem is you were going to move the front office and increase the guidance counselor's office, which the guidance counselor's office does not have a great layout, and it's also one of the things that I've mentioned is not many, but some school districts are putting their social workers and OASIS counselors in those rooms. So you would have, if you moved the main office, you would have more flexibility in how you did the guidance office. And the thinking behind putting in your person, it's actually someone that you rent out. OASIS actually rents the space out to you, is that a student could go in there for substance abuse counseling and testing without anyone being any the wiser, because they wouldn't know whether you were going in for that or just to see your guidance counselor about your scheduling. So that was why the other plan of moving the office would have been helpful, but I just think we just can't do it right now.
Yeah, it's
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you carried the cost of renovating the guidance suite in this still, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so we still have some flexibility to at least improve on the existing conditions and have it function better to address what you're saying. I mean, that is how most
They
districts
do it
and
now.
are dealing with it. It's
Yeah.
kind of a one-stop shop for itself. It's really student support services. It's not necessarily just
Guidance, and it gives students privacy, which is really the concern.
So we'll, and again, we'll try to accommodate that as much as we can I know we're working with a smaller area, but. I
Yeah,
think
square
that
footage.
We can certainly lay it out better than what it's currently laid out.
And so
So much hallway in there right now.
Yeah, there is a lot of hallway in there. And so by doing this, you pull out $2,781,096.
It's a lot of money.
And put back what?
Well, we put back a lot.
I'm
so
saying,
far.
I'm saying, well, hold on. So
Yeah, sorry.
we're not doing that and still pulling out 2.781, are we?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, the
Yes.
2.7 is the net savings after changing to this.
Yes.
Because you remember, you're not building new offices and you're not
Yeah,
putting in a brand new canopy, which
I
is
thought 2.8 was
expensive.
the cost of the whole thing.
No,
individually.
no, no, no.
No.
Yeah, that seems.
That's huge.
The only thing is, then to do that little addition and the corridor addition in the back, you still have to do $933,000 in a fire alarm for that front entrance addition. With not really no educational space, you're spending $1 million to do a fire alarm, yeah.
Well,
You weren't really
we
getting
clearly want
educational
classrooms.
space anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
You weren't getting educational space anyway. You were
Right.
getting an
That's
alumni
true.
room.
That's
You
true.
were getting a
Yes.
community room.
Yes.
That's absolutely
So,
true. Excuse me.
to
and we're
me,
enabling future growth of educational space, of instructional space.
Yes.
when your population changes, you can look at this differently because you do have less students right now going through, which gives you a little more, and coming up, there'll be less students in this, physically in the building.
Yep.
So that's it. Easy.
So I think,
Yeah,
yes,
got it.
Lisa? Okay. Okay, so the last remaining, well, we've got two remaining issues to talk through. One is the air conditioning and one is the stadium lighting studio. Where are you with, are you ready or no?
Everything except for the high school one now, I have to, if you're taking that one, I have to adjust that for that.
Okay, very good. All right, so why don't we talk through the, start to talk a little bit, and then Stu, when you're ready, interrupt us so we know, the board knows where they are with their numbers. All right. Okay. What would you like to take? Well, I guess the air conditioning is is where we are. So for us, the priority, or at least the administration, is the priority is to try to figure out how to get the spaces cooled, right? That has been important to us from the beginning. When we built the pre-bond scope, we always envisioned that as a priority for how we would do this. The question of how that gets how that gets done is up for discussion. It's probably not a bad segue into the energy performance contract discussion, right? Because the EPC priorities always included the air cooling, right? But not only the air cooling. There are 10 identified priorities within that EPC, which includes interior and exterior lighting, heating network organization, building envelope improvements, optimization of controls, plug load management, heating and power, gas-fired radiant heating, the air cooling, and solar capability. So when we put all that together, right, and the reason why we put the EPC in our thinking, and it was very wise thinking on the part of the board to tie an EPC to the capital project, would be to maximize your borrowing power, right? So in its current configuration, the total project cost is $5.331,494 in EPC cost. So that essentially takes whatever your bond is and increases it by that number. Now, if we go with a different configuration of cooling, that's likely to change a little bit. But that was the design around the EPC from the very beginning, right? It was a priority that we set, and it was a way. Absent that, we can't afford to do a lot of these projects, right? And we certainly can't afford to do the cooling in the way that we want to do the cooling. So there are two pathways to take here. One is to move forward as was in the base project, which had $3.3 million in cooling. If the board decides that you want to take a staged approach to this and focus on central cooling at the middle school and high school, which are your two largest populations and campuses and all that, move those AC units, the 98 units that we talked about earlier, from the middle school and the high school campus to the classroom spaces at the elementary school. We achieve our goal either way. It's an issue of affordability at this point. But the priority the priority has always been how do we cool the spaces. We've just had the hottest July in the history of the planet, from what we can tell. So the spaces get very hot in the brick buildings. Once they heat up, they don't cool down particularly well. So that's so it's really at this point a discussion of what the approach will be with regard to this. So go ahead. Thank you.
So we can save money by centrally cooling the middle school and the high school and taking those units and moving them to the elementary school.
Correct.
And we did discuss, though, that we would have the elementary schools sort of set up for future conversions to better cooling systems so that we could do that we could do it. Like, it's not as long-sighted as doing everything exactly the best way possible, but it saves money, and we're not being wildly short-sighted either. Is that a fair characterization?
I would say so. And then if what I might suggest that you do, would want to think about this a little bit more, but one one approach that the board can choose to take is the creation of another capital reserve for the purpose of funding the centralized cooling at the elementaries as you can do that.
And as you do it, you would do it you would go over you'd go for the hottest spaces first, I assume, like whatever they are, the top floors,
I don't know. We'd have to figure out. I don't know how to.
Or is there maybe there's some other efficiency?
I don't know.
I just want to say that I read all the responses to the EPC. It was a binder about yay big.
Yep.
If you look, there were very few people who responded because air conditioning is not an energy conservation project, right? Or energy performance contract. If you look at the numbers, the only one who really addressed it was the ecosystems response. But if you look at their response, you're paying about 26% in overhead and profit to ecosystems, about $1.3 million, right? That you're paying someone else. To make up on the air conditioning alone, it's a 123-year payback. I'm concerned about the fees that we're paying to someone. Even if you consider that there's 10 points, right, for overhead. Let's be generous. 10 points is big for overhead. For overhead, you're guaranteeing this project manager basically 15 to 16% in profit before you even think about how he's going to buy it out, if she's going to buy it out, the contractor's going to buy it out. It's probably going to come in lower. The real savings comes from the lighting. There is some savings on the boiler, there's some savings depending on what solar projects you do, but the bulk of the savings is coming through changing the lighting to the LED lighting. I'd rather not pay someone $1.3 million. I'd rather get the savings we're going to get from changing to LED lighting, pocketing that 1.3 and pocketing the savings and using the savings that we would get from doing a lighting, taking a different look and seeing who else is out there that may give us a better price on the lighting, or even doing the lighting ourselves and utilizing those funds to pay for the cooling. I just to hand over 26%, probably more, in overhead on a $5 million project it is a boatload of money. I mean, $1.3 million if you're paying that to the contractor. If you're air conditioning in the elementary schools, 1.7, you're practically there, even without the savings.
But the savings aren't, like we switched to LED, the savings, to get the savings, you still have to lay out the cash to do it, and the savings come in through a number of years, which is why we use the EPC.
What I'm saying is that I think
for it.
we should look at I think we should redo the EPC, is what I'm saying.
And we
That's
could,
what I'm
but then
saying.
We cannot have air conditioning.
So in Ecosystem's proposal, they actually have two options, one with cooling and one without.
Yes, they do. And one was 2-point-something million, and the other one was 5. I'm using it off the top of my head,
So
but
their option B is they've maximized their net present value of the project, which eliminates cooling, and it's a payback of roughly 9 years. And it's because it's the short-term payback solutions.
right. So and that's how you get the
That doesn't
18
address
years.
any of the cooling
But then you
fees
don't get the
that-
cooling.
that now need to be done for another funding mechanism. The reason there is the option A is because it allows the district to achieve some level of cooling where you have existing window units at no cost to the taxpayers.
With a 123-year payback. That's the reason why they get in with the 18. The only reason why we meet the 18-year payback for SCD is because of the savings we're achieving in option A.
Yes,
It's-
so
it's-
if you
it's
want
like
the cooling,
any-
it's like
It's
genius.
like any other energy performance contract. A lot of districts that do EPCs, they're not looking for cooling, but they want to replace boilers. Boilers are like 70, 80-year payback items. They still offset them with, interior and exterior lighting and controls optimizations. That's the premise of an energy performance contract.
And that's what we did- that's what we did here
Otherwise, you have to, it's a capital expenditure to replace this equipment.
I'm not sure that you can't do the cooling more efficiently on a more cost-efficient basis if you bid it out.
But with
But
what
if you bid it
money?
out, you need the funding for it.
Right, but we have every year 2.5, every year we have at least $2 million in fund balance, right? And 1 million we put towards the tax levy, and 1 million we either put in the funds or we use to pay out somewhere else. All I'm saying to you is I think it's criminal to pay someone 26%. I do, I think that has to be looked at.
Is there any possibility to negotiate that fee?
I mean, I'm sure we could ask. It's not necessarily 26%. They have a certain percentage for overhead and profit, and then a certain percentage for actually doing their job.
I said 26% by their own number, 25 points, I think, percent, almost 26%. If you look at their numbers for overhead and profit, what I'm saying is if you take off 10 points for overhead, before they even buy it out, before they even go out to bid, where they may make savings, you're paying someone at a minimum, you're guaranteeing them at a minimum probably 15% profit. I wish I could go out and get 15% profit all the time. I just don't think we look carefully at these numbers. I'm going to tell you, I did my own research on those numbers that I questioned last week, and I came out with very different numbers. So I really want to make sure when Ecosystems was the only one who did bid it in this way, that we are really looking at the numbers of what we're paying people. That's a lot of money to leave on. $1.3 million is a lot of money to leave on the table. That has to be negotiated.
I'm like, those are the bids, though, right?
So I'm saying rebid it. I'm saying think about it, try and think about it differently. I'm saying talk to some HVAC contractors, get some other ways that we're thinking about doing it. I understand people want, well, first of all, we never saw the results of the survey, so let's be clear, what I'm getting is that people want cooling. And I agree that cooling, air quality is important. I don't disagree with that. I understand why people want it. I get all of that. But I think that we haven't explored all the options to achieve that. And if you could take that 1.3 you're paying that contractor and use it towards your cost. I mean, you're saying that we have to have the money, but you have it. You have it. You have it a million different ways.
I'm not sure I agree with that. I mean, the EPC, I think, is a fairly unique funding mechanism.
Yes,
It lets you
because
move.
you are spreading your cost over 18-year period. You are borrowing the money to pay it's like a lease, to pay this over 18-year period. So whatever you are paying in the 18th year is not the same as using your fund balance. Which we cannot do because our fund balance usually goes into the capital reserve, which is what we use for some of these projects. So we cannot use fund balance.
The capital reserve, I just heard that the capital reserve is going to be fully funded at the end of next year.
No, phase 2.
Phase 2 will be fully funded.
Only
Because
phase 2.
There's a phase 3 coming. We were authorized to, the capital reserve is up to $8.5 million. We did the first phase, which was 3.3 million. Then the next phase will be 3 million. After that, then we continue funding it until we get to the $8.5 million. But the projects have already been listed. So we cannot add air conditioning to it because that's what Peter said. If that's what we have to do, if we have to go to a second or third capital reserve, that would be another thing we have to do.
I'm not paying someone 26%.
Yes,
I'm just not.
And then, yes, I would argue that that number seems high, but, we've had a bid process and we have what we have. And we've also had a lot of conversations, even in the course of the evening, about things that we're going to need to use the fund balance for if we don't do the stadium seating or the press box or various things. you know, that we keep moving out of the fund, that when we say we're moving into the budget, we're often looking at fund balance for those projects too. And I think the problem with the air conditioning is that some of it, in terms of what the EPC is covering, is the large centralized air projects in the middle school and the high school, which we can't do piecemeal with the bits and pieces of the fund balance as they become available. They are large projects that we need to do. And by scaling it back even and moving the window units that we have now into the elementary schools, we're then saying that's a burden we're now putting on future fund balance and or an additional capital reserve fund, which depends on fund balance, to continue to convert the window units then at the elementary schools to more efficient systems as we can do it.
Or you can look at, you could look, or you could also have HVAC contractors come in and value engineer the HVAC, and you could move some of the things out of the bond that you currently have out. Some of the, you could do the libraries on a rolling basis. You could do less of the security. You could make other options. To me, to pay someone 26%, I'm not signing off on that.
Just refresh, remember the cost, what's the cost of the air conditioning in the EPC?
2.199.
Roughly 2.2 million.
Are there other trustees with questions or concerns or thoughts about the air conditioning they want to voice? Share.
I just want to point out that making a decision one way or the other does not, there's no contractual obligation with the energy services company to have them move forward into the investment grade or comprehensive energy audit phase, which is really when you get into detailing the energy benchmarking and the scope of work of the energy performance contract. This was just their proposal for what they can provide to the district. The next phase of this is what's called a comprehensive energy audit, where they do take a deep dive into the district, and they work with the district and the board to develop the full scope of work. At that time, once everything is agreed to, that's when the district can decide to either move forward and enter into an AIA contract with the energy services company or not do the EPC at all.
In your experience, that phase generally increases the scope of the project?
It can. It has in the last project I've done. And it changes too, because what will happen is, for instance, an energy performance contract we currently have under design, they're changing some of the heating systems and the hot water piping. It's a steam to hot water conversion. So where they have existing steam piping, they're abandoning some of it and putting in smaller piping for hot water. Well, they're having to run some of that piping through classrooms. And then the discussion with the district and the board was, do you want to sheetrock and close these pipes? Do you want to just try to tuck them into a corner and paint them so they blend in? So those sort of things are all dynamic and developed throughout the comprehensive energy audit phase. And then at the end of that, once everyone, including the Board of Education, feels comfortable with the results of the project at hand, that's when you start to work through a contract with the energy services company. Or you can say, you know what, it's not for us at this time.
Well, we're better for having that information, but I think we need to go into it identifying as a board whether air conditioning is a priority, so we don't find ourselves at that point saying, well, we did this, and then not doing it. I think, for me, I'll speak, I'm speaking, that $2.2 million, we just fit in 4 for a locker room, so I'm not saying we couldn't find a way to do that within the scope of this. But to me, getting that cooling is a priority, and there's an opportunity in this bond to do it, so I would not like us to see, at the end of this bond process, not feel a very high degree of comfort that we are going to get cooling the way we have been talking about. I mean, Tim, you started tonight by saying that.
District-wide cooling is roughly a $5.5 million project.
Right.
Versus 4 million for high school locker rooms, which we need, but
Just so, again, so I understand, 5.5,
Would be if you did a more permanent cooling solution in the elementary schools also.
so 5.5 for the full,
is the full deal.
but you could take away 1.7 if you recycled the units that we're taking out?
Yes.
Plus the
But you
2.2.
still have the expense of the labor of moving everything over, so the
Not plus the 2.2, you're saying
electrical
5.5 total.
like that.
You're saying 5.5 including what's in the EPC?
5.5 is inclusive of the EPC. It's the 3.3 of the capital project and the 2.2 of the EPC.
There were two parts, if you remember, in the last meeting to the cooling. One was what was covered by the EPC, and the other part was another $2 or $3 million, right, for what wasn't covered, and that was in the bond, right? So you've now taken that out, part of it out, by moving the air conditioners down, because it was always, even with the EPC, because it only applied, remember, to the middle school and the high school, because they had the largest number of air conditioning units. So you couldn't achieve the savings at the elementary school under the EPC. So you always had additional fees from the very start for the cooling for the elementary schools, right? Am I summarizing correctly?
Yep.
Okay.
Stu has a number if anybody's interested.
Okay, Stu, give it to us.
Okay, the base project is $38,811,000. When I add those supplemental projects, which is the library casework, the 2 fire alarm systems, and the stadium lighting, we're up to $41,452,000. So that $41,452,000 still has stadium lighting for $1 million, and it still has the 1.7 in air conditioning savings that we didn't take out yet. So that 2.7 is still in that number.
So the stadium line is going to have to come out. That's going to have to be an alternate, I think, right?
It seems like it.
It's $1 million. You got to take it out.
$1.9 million.
I also think that we have some challenges with this bond and selling it. You have a large group of people that are alienated right away. If we're talking about saving money, so we need some planning, and it's keep this coming out either way. I think it's a much more involved project.
Joanna, would you be comfortable having that as an add alternate? So if you decide at some point in time, right, that you want to consider it, you at least have the authorization to do it? Right?
It'll look like a bait and switch.
Well, you'll have a list of supplemental projects.
Like we always do.
We always have a list.
We do it on the capital reserves. We do it every time we do a project. We do it, and there's also, I think $40 million is going to be a tough sell in this community at this time. I'm going to tell you that I do real estate law. I am not nearly as busy this year as I was last year. And if you read the New York Times article this past weekend on Bronxville, they'll tell you that the price per square foot has gone down about 10%, right? And there are multiple homes in my neighborhood for sale where there is just nothing happening. And even though the interest rates are lower this year than last year, everyone in the real estate industry will tell you the market is slower. And the reason why the market is slower is because of SALT. And that's been a big impact, especially on homes in areas like Long Island and Westchester that carry very heavy taxes. Hasn't had that big impact, as much of an impact in New York City, where the taxes are lower. But where the real estate tax is high, it's had a big impact. So I think $40 million is going to be a tough sell, and I think the stadium lighting is really, like, you give one hand, you take with another, right? So there are going to be people who are against it, and there are going to be people the booster people, the athletic people, who are going to be happy because they've been asking for it for 10 years. That you could be pulling in some yes votes or no votes. I mean, I don't think you weigh it on what's a yes vote or a no vote. I think you weigh it on what are our priorities and what do we as a board feel is more important. And I would say that in this community, that cooling would be more important than lighting. And I think that's a fair,
It impacts more.
it's a fair statement, right?
Yes.
Yes, it just impacts.
Right, so, and if you wanted to consider it as an alternative, you could put it as an alternative, but I think that's telling them that that's not our priority as a board right now, based upon the security and whatever
Yes,
repairs
I
that
agree.
we have,
I
right?
agree.
Right.
I don't think of it as a bait and switch, I think of it as a
I'm just
prioritization.
worried, can you imagine somebody being like, oh, they listed as an alternate, they're sort of pretending they're not gonna do it, but they're really gonna do it.
I
It
don't-
doesn't matter.
I don't really think I don't think you do it that way. I think we as a board have to say, this is what we want. And then if you think that $40 million is going to be a tough sell, then you say to yourselves, okay, if $40 million is going to be a tough sell, what do you think is going to sell? And, that's a whole new can of worms because then you're starting from scratch again,
Right.
right?
Right.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a question for the board if they're comfortable with 40 million. I think it's going to be closer than it was in the past. I wouldn't say it's going to fail, but I think right now people are really feeling it. I think you have a very active population right now that is watching the financing. That doesn't mean it's not going to pass.
Say that again?
The sooner the better.
Yeah. I mean, I think that through our calculations, we've calculated that in order for it to be tax neutral, it needs to be in that $38 to $39 million range. So I think we should land in that place. We can massage these numbers, but it sounds to me like what the board is saying is, with a bond of 41,452,000, right? With the stadium lighting in it and the air conditioning in it, that it sounds to me like the board is saying take the
Stadium
the stadium lighting out of the base bond. Is that
Yep.
am I hearing that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. So let's take that. So Stu, let's take that let's take that out, please. Okay.
40,443,000.
Okay.
Stu, can you just tell us briefly, I'm at a different number, I'm sure I'm wrong, but can you just tell us, based off what we have, hold on a minute, I need to add my 933?
And I can't guarantee I didn't make a mistake when I did this, but it should be right.
So yeah, with the 933, I didn't add the change, I'm at 40.5, so.
Yes.
That sounds about right.
Yes.
That's the fire alarm system
40 and a half.
that we have to do when we're on the high school.
Yes.
Either way.
So,
It still includes the
that
cooling.
includes the full bore, the 1.7 is
Yes,
in there
it's
still.
still in there with the 40.4 million, yes. You take that out, problem
You're there.
solved.
Yes.
But really, we're only short 600.
Yes,
If you take the one,
went down to under 40.
No, I thought he was looking for under 39.
I would like that. If you take the 1.7 out, you're at 38,742.
Right,
Right.
right.
Well,
Which
the true tax neutral number is a moving target with interest rates and escalation. I mean, it's,
Shifting.
right. That's a
This
sure.
is-
That pretty much gives you a sure thing, though. That 30 in the 38 range.
well, I don't want to be the only voice on the board, even though I feel strongly about the idea that doing it in that double stage isn't the right way to do it long-term. I think in terms of long-term value, really selling yourself short. But I'm not, I guess I want to hear from other people what they think.
No, I think that makes sense. And what's tricky about tax neutral is not only is it constantly shifting on the meta level, but no individual person is going to be impacted in a tax neutral way when they get their actual bill, right? And they can't none of us can effectively parse out what's causing what when you actually get your tax bill, right? It always changes. Some people are gonna go up, some people are gonna go down, and the bond's gonna impact them, and it's always a mess, like, where
Right.
people go.
That's why I
"You
hate the
said
word
you
tax
weren't
neutral.
raising-" Right, you weren't raising taxes, but my bill went up.
Right, no, I don't think I think tax neutral is not really a good terminology, because I don't think any,
What average tax neutral works?
no, I don't think any of it works. I gotta be honest with you, because if people are concerned about the taxes, that's money they feel that could be saved, right? So you're basically saying, that, and if you have a shifting, the reality is, if Nassau County makes a deal with LIPA, and American Water starts passing through those taxes, and some of those taxes get shifted to your residents, those numbers become meaningless. And the reality is, we know something like those things are going to happen somewhere along the line. We don't know what it means, but it's not in the real world. If you didn't spend the money, you could save the money, and you'd pass the savings on to the taxpayers. So saying it's tax neutral is not really.
But does anyone actually get, like, the year we lowered the tax levy slightly, and of course, no one noticed or actually saved any money. So, but then this is my question. If we believe long-term, the more efficient, better solution is to go ahead and really do all the AC instead of like moving the systems and this and that, because it pains us when we have to, like, we do one thing and then we have to go back and kind of do another. If we believe that is the sort of, I'm going to say logical, but I'm not sure that's the right word, solution is to really do the whole AC thing. And it makes the quote-unquote tax neutral number wonkier, right? That we're erring on the high side rather than erring on the low side. Because it is a moving target. As a board, do we err on the side of what we think is like a smart, long-term decision on our infrastructure? Or do we err on the side of the final, that number that we're going out to the public with on a specific day?
I don't
Because you
think.
want it to pass.
I don't think it makes a difference whether it's 38 million or 40 million. I don't. I think once you get into those numbers, the people are going to go ballistic at the numbers, and I don't think they're going to buy the tax neutral, just for the reasons I said to you.
Yes.
I think the question is, I mean, the more relevant question is, do you think $40 million would pass? Not whether you think 38 point something will pass or 40.5 will pass, right? The question is, do you think 40 will pass? That's the question.
My answer to that is that I think it has statistically the same chance of 28 passing. People who don't want to pass a bond are not voting for a bond. And if we lower it by 10, they're still going to be like, what do you need this for? I think people are still going to say that.
I do.
I think it matters.
Yeah. I do think there is in fact a difference between 39.9 and 40.
I agree.
I could be completely wrong. But likewise, I don't really think there's a difference between 29 and 39, but, I think there are.
I think there's for a certain contingent. There's a certain no contingent. It doesn't make a difference whether it's 29 or 39. But I think there is another contingent that's out there that says we don't mind keeping our schools updated and safe and making repairs. We do not want to be in the same situation as Glen Cove that needed to pass an $84 million bond and failed.
Which is why.
And I think there is that same contingent of people who are going to question what you're spending the $40 million on, who are not going to think you should be spending that kind of money on security, on upgrading the libraries,
Or even air conditioning.
or air conditioning. There'll be a lot of people who are going to be upset about the air conditioning.
I do think there's something about taking care of the high school locker rooms that feels a little
But,
more sure?
but that's why I wanted the high school locker rooms put back in. Not only because I think it's important, I do think it's important. I think when you're spending $40 million and you're not addressing what has been repeatedly brought up as a necessary repair, I think it smells to people who are on the wavering line that we're wasting their money. That's what I think. I can't in good conscience vote off on a $40 million bond and leave that nurse's office or those locker rooms the way they are.
I agree.
Those are
And to
right.
bring it back to what Sarah said, so we spend this money, and 3 years from now, they go back to school night, and they can't hear their new teacher because we took some 15-year-old air conditioning unit that's been torn out of a wall, reinstalled, and is rattling because it's got, all this noise in it.
I mean, so I would say to you that.
Something to be said about doing it, right?
Yes. The unit, the air conditioning unit itself is the least expensive component of
Right.
that, right?
Exactly.
So
It's having the right wiring.
exactly.
And the window.
Yep, and exactly. So the ones we're putting in, John, are what, about 1,200 that we're buying for the classrooms, right?
BTUs or?
$1,200.
$1,200, they're not expensive.
$1,200. So if
And
we
you don't have
had,
to be Einstein to put it in.
so if we had a situation where we had a loud clunky one, we would just replace it, right? Right, because we've got the instructional thing as well. So that for the board to is exactly this place where you are. Do we do it now or do we stage it? I'll ask Tina and Daryl this question. Maybe Bob, you'd know the answer too. How much redundancy is there in scope if the board were to decide to do the middle school, high school central cooling right now, and then say we'll move the window units into the elementary spaces and we'll deal with those, later on through whatever funding source we determine to do it through? How much redundancy does the board incur in
think it's
scoping the
much.
project that way?
Can't be that much because you're talking two totally different animals.
Because you're already doing the electrical infrastructure upgrades to put in the window AC, that's probably drawing more power.
Right.
A split system. So as Tina said, you're probably looking at a new window panel. You pull out the window air conditioning, and the labor and the material costs associated with that. You already have the power now. We may not operate at the same voltage, but we can spec something that would, so there wouldn't be much redundancy.
Okay. So they could be standalone. They could be standalones if you want them to be.
And it's good for the district and it's a challenge, but your unit ventilators in the schools are all in fairly good condition. Because another solution to cooling would be to put in a unit ventilator that has a cooling coil in it. And you would still have a two-pipe system, but you would just switch between heating and cooling throughout the year. But you don't want to do that because you have to do a unit ventilators.
Because we did that in the last bond. We upgraded anything and that was,
Now you're putting in like a
that was all.
standalone cooling system rather than having it integral with your ventilation system. So you're not replacing something that's still a fairly new asset. Now, there could be some efficiency savings, back to your point, if we took the $2.2 million of the cooling in the EPC and put it in the capital project, because now you have your engineer of record, which is hopefully us, designing the whole thing, rather than, sort of an energy conservation measure from an ESCO doing it. But again, that's another $2 million roughly that would have to be added back into the capital project cost.
Yeah, and I just don't think you could afford that.
Did we discuss, I thought we discussed at our meetings also, and nobody may think it's a good idea, but we discussed having that separate bond resolution for air conditioning or something else, a second resolution, a second vote, and give them the option, the public, and say, okay, in the base bid, we got
these window units going in the elementary school, but for 2 million more or whatever more, we can put all new units in the, wall-hung units in the air conditioning.
No, it is-
And you could figure out that $2 million would cost the taxpayer only $10 a month, whatever it is, might be something to sell to them. Hey, it's gonna cost you, but only this will cost you. It's a possibility. They've done that in other districts, I believe, is made that a separate proposition.
You could phase it in and you do the ductless as a alternate. If
You could.
You could also
And
slide
you,
this
and you could do
1.7.
both, you could do both. You
Mm-hmm.
could plan on doing the units, right, the window units this way, and then put in the ductless in the elementary as an alternate, and when your bids come in, or when you renegotiate with your ESCO, which we're going to do, we are, Daryl. Trust me. Just ask the NLRB judge today if I'm relentless, okay?
Ask me.
All right, then you could, if you, when we save our money on our ESCO, we can use those savings to actually do the ductless. So you put it in as an alternate.
What I was thinking also is we're not 1.7 over our target. We could slide. We can get to a number we like. We
Right.
take, of that 1.7, we could say
Right.
800 is going to be included to get us to 39.5.
Yes.
And then these numbers are not accurate, but close enough.
But-
And then put the additional 850 or 900 into the supplemental projects.
Yep.
In other words, give the spaces that need the most, that are directly in the sun, whatever you want to, south facing, whatever.
Right. You think it's 1.7, but we only got 8, so put in
What?
the 8.
Yes.
Right.
What about this nurse's suite?
Put in a ductless split rather than a window unit,
Yeah, for
Oh,
certain-
for sure. Yeah,
But I'm
yes.
saying, so at least you get some that way.
Yeah,
And that
for
would be
sure.
the
Yes.
flux, and then put the rest in supplemental, along with the classrooms along the new corridor.
Right, and then what,
It's
the,
not black and white.
no, and the way to, the way to manage that, we'd have to figure out how to absorb the balance of that, right? So which is tricky, because we've got a lot of things that we've identified as projects that we wish to do, that we've said, oh, we're going to do that with fund balance, or we're going to do that with cap reserve, or whatever it's going to be, and I just want to be upfront and, honest with all of you to say that we've taken on a lot of that. That's another,
I'm saying, my suggestion was to make it a supplemental project within the bond.
I see,
So you have the 1.7, which is recycling existing units.
yes,
Rather than existing 100%, or all 98 units,
yes,
you recycle 50 of them. You keep
Oh,
the
I
other
see.
48 in storage, so when those 50 go, you can pop that in, and you have double the life on those.
yeah,
And then with the other spaces, you use,
You can't
Yeah.
get.
You have to store them. What I was
Half in.
saying was do the elementaries as a supplemental.
make better
And
sense,
and it's possible with the numbers that we could get
make better
half
sense,
of what we need for the elementaries and
do this.
Yeah,
and list the rest as supplemental and,
maybe, but
for the best, I'm looking at you.
If we split it into two, then we will have the problem of phasing.
I got a problem, yeah.
Which
Yeah.
things that are already allocated to certain people.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Don't think of it as like,
it's not a
I
bad
don't know what you
approach.
want people to do.
We've regretted not doing things the
The right
first
way, right?
time around. One other piece that's not being discussed with the window units is you have an SED component of not meeting code because you tend to turn the univent off to allow to cool the room.
You don't get the fresh air requirements.
And as air conditioning becomes more prevalent, you don't know if the state's going to crack down on these things. So now you plan for this stopgap measure of installing the window units, and then the state says, you can't do this, and now you're in a jam. So to me, there's too many what ifs. As much as the savings would be nice, I'm all for doing it the right way once.
And we'd rather not regret not doing it.
Well, sorry. Are we,
We do, but I think in the long run, it's the better way because you're just spending money to move a unit, and then you're gonna spend money to take that unit out and put the unit in. I know we're struggling, and I see all the points, but,
Right. But
right?
yeah, yes, but at the same time, I think there's some value in the board considering how to leverage this in multiple ways, right? So you
Right.
leave your options open, right? So if you right now say to your, in the base the base project, we're going to include central air cooling at the middle school, high school. We're going to repurpose the window units to the elementaries. We achieve our cooling objective. As an ad alternate, we figure out a way to, we put in there the cooling by building, right? So what would it cost to centrally cool the Glenhead School, the Glenwood Landing School, the Seacliff School? And to the extent that you have unused funds, you have voter authorization to do those projects, you might be able to split those I don't know how to we'd have to think through how to scope it, right? But do we focus on the top floors of the school or the hottest wings of the school to start? And then, as the project moves forward, we could either manage that through the establishment of a cap reserve, or we deal with fund balance, right? But it becomes a more manageable use of fund balance and the general fund budget
Right.
to do it that way than to, right? But it also gives the board some options,
Right, so what I'm suggesting is put it in the scope as a supplemental to give us that flexibility, because then we can do it.
That's what I'm saying, right?
And
That's what
I
I'm
would
saying,
say,
we're on the same
meanwhile,
page.
if we could
Get it done.
start collecting the actual data on how hot different rooms in the elementary
Yes.
schools are.
Yes.
So that if you get in the position where you're like, we're gonna do some of it,
Yeah.
you can say to the community, like, no, really, this room's like 100 degrees, so we're doing this room, even though it's not the room your kid is in.
I think there's a better way to look at it. I think Daryl hit on it when he first came and we interviewed you. It's about air quality, right? So the window units do not address air quality.
No, they do not.
They just do not. And with the rising allergies and asthma and people with sensitive, pardon?
People believe that they do, right? We get people coming all the time saying that they need a window AC in their kid's room because of the kid's allergies, even though we know that doesn't actually fix the air quality thing. So we got to work on the
But
education piece too, right?
once you put in the central air, listen, I work in an office with a window unit. It's cool, but I have no idea what people are saying on the other end of the phone. No clue. Just not.
Ask the judge.
Just not. Can you email me? I'll talk to you about January when I have the window open and I can't hear because the radiator is too freaking hot.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I think if you, I think you leave yourself the most flexibility by doing it that way, right? It gets you a place where your bond scope is settled. You're to a place where you could comfortably go to the community and say this is a number that, we're reasonably certain. Whatever the terminology we use.
We just have to come up with better terminology.
Yeah. But it's going to have a minimal impact. So when we looked at the bond scope of when we had capital markets run the bond size of 39.9, so the average, for an average for a home valued at $750,000, they would see an incremental tax increase of decrease of $130 a year, right? Based on
Which
the
means I'm
borrowing.
paying $1,000. Because seriously, there's very few homes in Glenhead that are at $750,000.
You're saying
I'm saying a decrease.
Right, but they're not that many homes.
Right,
for-
$1 million
right,
home
exactly.
is 173, and $1.5 million is 260, right? So, I think they're that's in 23, 24.
That's a 39.9?
That's at 39. Olivia, look at this again for me and tell me because these numbers are red. Why does he have? You have your layered debt numbers?
Because right now, if we push all that into supplemental, we're at 38.8.
Yes.
Go to 39.9.
But what are we doing about the
Say that again?
2 million?
It sounds good, yeah.
Well, that's sort of be hashed out.
Well, I really think I think we have to look at that. I do. I think we have to look at the EPC. I'm just, because we didn't get a lot of response to it, and I don't think some of those projects are, like, you have that solar heating thing on the top of the Seacliff School. How are you maintaining that? How are you getting the snow off it? How are you cleaning it? They have to be cleaned. What are the costs that are in that? I mean, I just think some of the projects they had in there were not feasible. So you don't really even know what your savings are that you're actually getting that to cover that air conditioning. You really have to define the scope of it. So that too. So you really need to go up. It gives you all the more reason to go up to the 39.9, because if you don't do that, you're not even sure you're going to, if you don't come to terms with a good EPC, you're not even sure you're covering the middle school and the high school. Right?
True.
If you go from 38 to 39.9, regardless of what you do with the EPC, right, you can pay for the middle school and the high school. Close. Maybe not quite. Close.
I just don't know how we sell this without, well, we would still be able to sell it with instructional spaces 100% covered.
Yes.
They would just do the old ones.
Yes.
I really feel that the people who are going to vote for the bond are the people who want to see the improvements to the school. I don't really think they care about what the tax impact is. I gotta be honest with
They take
you.
something to go vote for.
They really don't care.
Came to their house and asked them what they wanted, that's fine, but for them to decide they're gonna leave work an hour early or plan their day around it and get there has to be a reason for them to do that.
Right, and what I'm saying to you, the reason for most of the people who are voting yes for the bond is because they want to see the upgrades to the school.
Yes.
Right? And the people who are voting no because they think whatever we're doing isn't necessary and they don't want their taxes to go up.
And they voted no on the budget the year
Right.
we lowered the tax levy.
Right. So I think $40 million is going to be a tough nut to sell either way. So I don't think it makes a difference if you're doing 38 something or 39 something. Either way, the no vote is going to see it as 40.
Right. And the extra $1 million, we can actually do something with.
Right.
Yeah.
So do we
Do
bring
you
it
get
back
no-
to 40.4?
No, we don't go over 40.
39.9.
39.8, 39.9. We started out, when we started out on July 11, we were 39.772. And if you did everything, all those proposed offsets that we offered to the board, that puts the bond at 39,899,766.
Such a nice number. Say it again.
$39,899,766.
There you go. 39.9.
It's a nice number, Sue.
What's in that
Thank
39?
you.
Did we do 19.9?
Doesn't matter. The
Yes,
number
we
sounds
did. No, we did 19.3.
19.3.
We did 19.3 the last time. And that's why the locker rooms still look the way they look, John. And the nurse's station still looks the way it looks.
Yes, ma'am.
He did 178 million back in 98, he would have been done.
Yes, we got the lighting savings.
How much?
Yes, I know. So that helps us with the air conditioning.
Yes, that will help with the air conditioning. So we are putting $1 million back in for the air conditioning.
So the all-inclusive, right, the number that the board will ask the bond amount that we will ask the board to authorize, right, is $39,899,766, right?
And that will be some removal of lights, addition of some air conditioning.
Correct.
And the rest will be supplemental, and we'll do what we can.
Right, stadium lighting is out,
Correct.
right? I just need to ask the board if you, because I'll do it either way, it doesn't matter. Do you want that as a supplemental project, or do you want to remove it altogether?
I think if you're going to put in the elementary air conditioning as a supplemental project, you should not put in the stadium lighting. That's my feeling. Because I think then, you're not getting it all done. I think then it's deceptive.
Okay. What do you think, Tim?
I agree with Marianne on that. And I think the lighting is something for people to rally around to oppose the bond also.
Okay.
So.
Is there anybody else who feels differently? All right, so stadium lighting is out altogether, not as a supplemental.
Okay.
Got it?
Okay, I'm just going to ask one more time.
Yes.
About the classrooms on the corridor. How much more is that?
Well, the savings would be, yeah, the classroom, 1.7.
1.7. It's a little big for supplemental. Sorry.
I gotta go to Georgia tomorrow. We gotta wrap this up.
So you might say that Georgia on your mind right now?
Yes, I'm on the road tomorrow.
Get the midnight train?
Yeah.
Midnight
You
train
have
to
Georgia
Georgia?
on your mind now.
A little
Take the
bit
midnight train.
of the air conditioning in.
We are,
Take the 1.7. Go ahead.
I would say if we're taking out 1.009 for stadium lighting,
Correct.
then I believe we are agreed on putting back 1.009 of air conditioning to get to that
Essentially,
suite.
yes.
Yeah.
We did. That's what we did.
Is the thought that would cover the spaces we're renovating in the elementary schools, probably, right?
You're going to do it, you're going to come up with a way to make it best bang for our buck and hopefully get into the overflow.
Going to
Right.
do something.
All right, so
Then
that's
you're
so.
paying-
It's 934 for abatement. We're gonna beat that.
All right, so $39,899,766. Yes? I think it's a good bond plan, board members, right? I do want to talk date. Last thing to talk about is, at the last board meeting, we talked about 3 potential dates. We talked about Tuesday, November 19, Tuesday, December 3rd, and Tuesday, December 10th. It felt to me in our last discussion that there was a bit of a lean towards the December 10 date. Is that concerning? Is that concerning? Okay, good. Right.
I think, listen, I'm gonna say, once you get into the Christmas holidays, people, they don't, it's, I think if you go before Thanksgiving,
It's too soon.
it's too soon. I think you would get better turnout. And people wouldn't feel like you're trying to slip it in the holidays.
We did.
December.
The last one was December 3rd.
December 3rd, right?
No,
And
December
people
8th,
weren't
you told
happy.
me. You told me
8th or
December
3rd.
8th or 9th.
8th or 9th, maybe.
You said the Immaculate
Remember,
Conception?
Olivia?
I don't remember.
Tuesdays are voting day,
Yeah, well, it was the
election
3rd.
days.
I might have been wrong with the 8th. I think it was the 3rd.
I
It
mean,
was the
if you
3rd?
need the 10th, you need the 10th. But I would say it's
December.
it's November is probably a better time in terms of voter turnout.
I think November 19th is 2 days before Thanksgiving. I think people are,
No, it's not 2 days before Thanksgiving.
Oh, it's not.
Thanksgiving's the following week.
so then
December is always a better day.
Why?
December. For some reason, Thanksgiving people are rushing to the holidays. It's a more relaxed week. That's why we've always done it in December. I think we did too in December.
Yeah, they were all in December.
No.
Yeah, that's a
my
good
my
point.
son will be home, but almost no one else is home. James will be home?
I would
Because I know
struggle
four of them
with
are not home.
So I think the more time we have to educate the community, the better, right? That's important. I think, so, my sort of lean in recommendation to you is either the 3rd or the 10th of December.
Then do it the 10th,
I
because the
like-
3rd is right after.
You have winter
Thanksgiving.
concerts both nights of those votes here, so you'll have public in the building when
Right.
you're voting, so just so you know.
So tell me what you're thinking.
I like the 10th.
I like the 10th.
Okay. Any objections to the 10th? Okay, we have a date.
Okay.
Very good. All right. Anything else that you think of?
I think we're good.
You think we're good? All right. So that said, I want to thank the board very much. I think we did very, very good work, and I appreciate your efforts here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you for being here.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
It was long, we appreciate it.
I need a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. All in favor, yeah.
Okay.
Second, motion, yeah.
Got it.
That was great.
I think that was.